I woke up and found myself standing in a rich family's villa. I had been reborn, back to the very first day I met the Liu family, my birth parents. I had died in a terrible future. My own birth mother had poisoned me and handed me over to criminals. I had killed their leader and died with him. But somehow I was alive again, and I had a second chance. In front of me were my birth parents, my birth sister Liu Xixue, and my brothers. They had found me because I was the real daughter of the Liu family, switched at birth. I felt nothing warm toward them. I already knew how the story ended. Liu Xixue would smile sweetly at first, then secretly frame me for things I never did. The whole family would take her side every time. They never truly cared about me. So, I didn't come to reunite with family. I came to sign a land contract. My adoptive mother owned the rights to Yuan Mountain, which the Liu family wanted for a resort. I knew a deadly mudslide was coming in 3 days, the start of the apocalypse, and I needed the money from this deal to prepare and protect my real family. I negotiated firmly, got an extra payment for the fish harvest, and secured 4.4 million yuan to be paid the next day. Then I refused to stay the night, ignored their attempts to guilt me, and walked straight out. After leaving the villa, I called my adoptive mother and told her not to travel that day. I needed to get my whole family away from Yuan Mountain before the mudslide hit. Then I went up the mountain and found a large, white granite rock I remembered from childhood. In my past life, my birth sister Liu Xixue had accidentally discovered a magical space hidden inside this rock and used it to gain power, which she later used against me. This time, I activated it first. Inside was a beautiful space with a stream and farmland, and a small talking white cat who served as my guide. The space could grow any crop in any season and raise fish and shrimp perfectly. I also discovered I could move objects in and out using only my mind. I tested this ability on our fish ponds and transferred hundreds of fish into the space. The stream even purified them automatically. I realized this space was going to be essential for surviving the coming apocalypse. Now it was mine, not Liu Xixue's. With the contract signed, the money coming, and the secret space in my hands, I headed home to my real family, ready to change everything. I walked inside and found my mom, uncle, and grandmother all waiting for me. Seeing their faces after so long made my eyes fill with tears. I ran straight into my mom's arms. "What's wrong, dear?" my grandmother asked softly, stroking my hair. I forced myself to calm down and told them the important news. I had signed a land contract with the Liu Group that day for 4.4 million yuan, to be paid tomorrow. My mom and uncle were surprised. They asked why I hadn't waited until after the fish harvest and why I hadn't talked to the family first. I took a breath and told them the truth. A mudslide was coming to Yuan Mountain the day after tomorrow. We had to leave by tomorrow. They were stunned. My grandmother said she had lived there for decades and never once seen a mudslide. My uncle pointed out that the local geology made it unlikely. I knew it was hard to believe. But I told them firmly, the mudslide would reach our home and affect our 2 neighboring houses as well. We needed to pack up and move to our apartment in the city tomorrow. They looked at my face and could tell I was serious. They knew I wasn't the type to cause trouble over nothing. Ever since my adoptive parents divorced, I had quietly helped manage the family and was always careful and steady. After my grandmother and uncle were once scammed out of 80,000 yuan, the family always consulted me on money matters first. I added, if no mudslide came, we could always move back. My uncle nodded first. You're the only university graduate in this family. I trust you. My mom and grandmother agreed. My grandmother did worry briefly about the Liu family losing money on the land deal. I reassured her they were a large company with insurance. I felt zero guilt about it. In my past life, they had cost me everything, including my life. We sat down for lunch. Grandmother made simple home-cooked food, stir-fried vegetables, chili pork, and a stewed chicken from the yard. Since we were moving, we couldn't take the chickens with us. It was the most ordinary meal, but I ate 3 full bowls of rice. In the apocalypse, normal food had become incredibly expensive. I had often survived on government emergency rations while giving real food to the Liu family. Tasting this simple home cooking again almost broke me. After lunch, we started packing. We were moving to a furnished apartment in the city that my mom had bought in my name years ago, so we didn't need to bring furniture. I went to the kitchen first. After living through the apocalypse, I couldn't bear to waste any food. Just then, a message appeared in my mind from the space system. Storage area unlocked. You may store as much as you like. Inside the space, a huge multi-story warehouse had appeared, with neat shelves and sections. The cat explained that food stored there would stay perfectly fresh and be sorted automatically. I was thrilled. This was perfect for stocking up supplies. I cleared out the entire kitchen: rice, flour, oil, salt, sugar, vinegar, soy sauce, and all of grandmother's homemade preserved meats and sausages. Mom and grandmother packed clothes and bedding. My uncle wrapped the appliances in foam and boxed them up. We worked until evening, when my aunt arrived home early from her job at a clothing factory after my uncle called to tell her about the mudslide. She walked in, didn't even take off her coat, and immediately started packing and giving orders. I thought of my cousin Xia Zian, her son, who was away serving in the military. In my past life, the last time I saw him was at our family's funeral. We had held each other and cried. Not long after, the disasters came and all soldiers were called up for emergency duty across the country. I never saw him again. This time, things would be different. We packed through the night. The moving company was booked for the next morning. I quietly moved some extra items into my space while no one was looking. By 10 at night, we did a final check of the whole house, then washed up and went to bed. Early the next morning, I checked my phone and saw a bank notification. The money had arrived, 6.4 million yuan. That was 2 million more than the agreed amount. There was also a message from my birth brother Liu Siming. He explained that the extra 2 million was a gift from the Liu family to my adoptive mother as thanks for raising me. He suggested she use it for her retirement. He also asked me to call him once I was packed so he could bring me back to the Liu family home. I stared at that number for a moment. In my past life, the Liu family had sold me to criminals for exactly 2 million yuan. And now they were handing me 2 million as compensation. What strange justice. I knew what they were really doing, trying to buy my loyalty and cut my ties with my adoptive family. I laughed coldly to myself and didn't reply. I thought about my past life, when a terrible blizzard hit during the apocalypse. Liu Siming had a dangerously high fever and no one knew what to do. I went out alone into the storm to find medicine for him. He recovered, but I came back sick myself. When Liu Xixue pretended to check on me, Liu Siming actually got annoyed and said it was my fault for getting ill and making extra work for her. I remembered every single thing they had done to me. This 2 million? I decided to think of it as collecting a little interest from the Liu family before the real debt was settled. Meanwhile, back at the Liu family villa, after I left, my birth mother felt a little sad that she hadn't even noticed me go. She had been too busy comforting Liu Xixue. My birth father Liu Bo told my brother to transfer an extra 2 million on top of the agreed amount, hoping the money would push my adoptive family to let me go and encourage me to return to the Liu family quickly. He assumed I was only hesitating because my younger brother had upset me and that any girl would prefer being a rich daughter to living on a farm. He ordered my younger brother Liu Xiyuan to go to Yuan Mountain the next day, apologize to me, and bring me back. Liu Xiyuan was furious, but agreed when his allowance was threatened. Liu Xixue played her usual role, pretending to feel guilty, crying softly, offering to move out so I could have my place in the family. My birth mother immediately rushed to comfort her and promised to buy her an expensive painting she had wanted. When no one could see her face, Liu Xixue smiled quietly to herself. To Liu Xiyuan, Liu Xixue was the perfect sister, elegant, talented, accomplished. He was proud of her. The idea of a village girl like me being his real sister was something he simply refused to accept. He wanted me gone and never to return. None of that bothered me. I already knew exactly who these people were. I had no interest in going back to them. I had 6.4 million yuan, my real family was safe, and the mudslide was coming. That was all that mattered. That morning, I went next door to check on our neighbor, Grandma Liu, an elderly woman who lived alone. My grandmother was already there helping her pack. Grandma Lu grabbed my hands the moment she saw me. She said my grandmother had warned her the night before about the mudslide, and she hadn't slept at all. She even mentioned that her eye had been twitching and she'd been feeling anxious for days. Now she understood why. I told her calmly to come with us and stay in the city for a while. She sighed and said she had planned to live out her quiet remaining years right there and die peacefully in her home. Now, even that was being taken from her. My grandmother teared up and said they needed each other. Neither of them should be alone. Grandma Lu had an interesting but painful life story. She had once been a university professor, remarkable for her time. But her husband abandoned her and their baby son, running off with another woman and taking all their savings. Grandma Lu worked during the day and took in laundry at night, raising her son alone while also caring for her sick in-laws until they passed. Years later, just when life seemed to ease up, her son brought his father back, now paralyzed and helpless, and demanded she take care of him. She refused and threw them both out. Her son then went to a TV reconciliation show, hoping they would pressure her into forgiving her husband. When she refused to be filmed, he brought the crew to her school. The school, worried about bad publicity, let her go, though they quietly gave her some compensation money. But the show edited everything to make her look like a heartless wife who abandoned a sick husband. Friends and colleagues turned against her. Exhausted and hurt, she cut ties with everyone and moved to Yuan village, which she had visited years ago for research. She rented the abandoned house next to ours, repaired it, and became my grandmother's neighbor. The two of them had supported each other ever since. When my adoptive parents divorced and my mother was buried in debt, I stayed with my grandmother. Grandma Lu used to hold me on her lap and teach me English word by word. To me, she was family. I told her that she and my grandmother had looked after me when I was small, and now it was my turn to look after her. Wherever we went, she was coming with us. She wiped her eyes and said firmly, "If death isn't taking me today, then I'd better live properly." I helped seal her boxes and went outside to wait for the moving truck. Instead, a luxury car pulled up first. Out stepped Lu Xiyuan, my birth family's youngest son, looking around with a disgusted expression. "What a miserable place," he muttered. "The road is barely even a road." I hadn't expected him to show up. In my past life, this never happened. I felt immediate irritation. "If you don't like the road, don't come," I snapped. He said our father had sent him to bring me back. I thought about what happened in my past life. Within 3 days of moving into the Lu house, Lu Xixue had destroyed an expensive painting and blamed it on me. No one believed my denial. After that, Lu Xiyuan had gone out of his way to hurt me, putting glue in my cup, hiding needles in my food, and rallying his rich friends to gang up on me at social events. Once, one of his friends pushed me into a pool. Another time, someone put something in my drink. My parents always took his side. "You're the older sister, just let it go. Don't cause trouble or Mum will be upset." Thinking about all of that, I was done pretending. "Get lost," I said. "I'm not coming back to that house." He stared at me, confused by my sharp change in attitude. Yesterday, I had been polite to our parents. Now I was shouting at him. "Are you seriously turning down everything the Lu family can offer?" he asked, gesturing at our farmhouse. "Look at where you live. You came all the way to this terrible place yourself," I shot back. "Doesn't that make you the pathetic one?" he sputtered. "What do I have to do to make you come back?" "Tell your precious sister Lu Xixue to leave," I said. "Then maybe I'll consider it." "Why would she leave? She's perfect." "Why don't you like her?" I spotted the moving truck pulling up at our gate. I had no more time for this. "I don't even like you," I said. "Why would I like her?" "Now move. You're in the way. I'm your real brother." "Why don't you like me?" I didn't answer. I turned around and walked back inside. He stood there for a moment, then slammed himself back into his car. As he left, his driver quietly mentioned that it looked like we were moving house. Lu Xiyuan said nothing, his face dark and stormy the whole way home. We loaded everything onto the truck, our boxes, then Grandma Lu's things as well. Then all of us headed toward the city apartment together. We moved into the city apartment and spent the afternoon cleaning and setting up beds. None of us could sleep that night. We all sat around the table waiting nervously. Just after midnight, my uncle found video footage on his phone. The mudslide had hit. Drone videos showed mud and giant rocks crashing down the mountain, destroying everything including our home and the fruit orchard my uncle had spent years building. Everyone was shaken. My grandmother cried quietly. She had lived there her whole life, and losing that home hurt deeply. Grandma Lu held her and reminded her that they were alive, and that home is wherever your family is. My mom promised they could rebuild someday. I then told everyone I had already arranged something important. I had contacted my cousin Zian, who was serving in the military, and bought train tickets for my mom, grandmother, uncle, and aunt to visit him the next day. I knew from my past life that once the disasters started, soldiers would be called away everywhere and family visits would become impossible. This might be their only chance to see him for a long time. Everyone agreed, right away. We went to bed exhausted. I also need to mention what was happening with the Lu family that night. My birth brother Lu Siming was woken up by news of the mudslide. As he dealt with the business crisis, one thought kept bothering him. Had I somehow known the disaster was coming? I had signed the contract so quickly, taken the money fast, and moved out immediately. He pushed the thought away, telling himself it was impossible. What I didn't know then was why Lu Siming had really brought me back to the Lu family. Years ago, the family had secretly discovered Lu Sishua wasn't their biological daughter, but they kept loving her anyway. Lu Siming had developed feelings for her that went too far. When their parents arranged for Lu Sishua to marry into another powerful family, he panicked and rushed to find me, the real daughter, hoping my return would cancel that arrangement. Now with the Yuan mountain project destroyed and the company already struggling financially, Lu Siming had nothing but problems. He got dressed in the middle of the night to go talk to his father. None of that was my concern. My family was safe, and I had bigger things to prepare for. The next morning I drove my family to the train station. They packed warm clothes for my cousin Zian, along with homemade preserved meats and sausages, and supplies I bought from the supermarket. After seeing them off, I rented a small truck. I had a lot of supply shopping to do in the coming days. On the drive home, my birth mother called again. I hung up without answering. She and Lu Siming had been sending me long messages about how wonderful Lu Sishua was and begging me to give her a chance. I had no time for any of that. When I got back, Grandma Lu immediately sensed something was off. She asked me directly what I was hiding from the family. I decided to be honest with her. I told her that serious, unprecedented natural disasters were coming and that this apartment was in a danger zone. We would need to move again soon. She nodded, unsurprised. So that's why you sent everyone away. She was right. I needed a few days without the family around. I had too many things to do and too little time to explain everything. I had less than a month before the next disaster. I needed to sell this apartment, buy a safer place, stock up on supplies, and make renovations. Every day counted. After lunch, I drove to the seed market. I walked into a shop and confidently told the owner I wanted seeds for every common vegetable: spinach, cabbage, radish, tomatoes, chili, eggplant, and more. I asked for the best and most expensive ones. The friendly shop owner asked if I was buying for a company. When I said no, just for home use, she laughed kindly and pushed over some ordinary packets instead. She explained that the most expensive seeds could cost thousands per bag, patented varieties bred to look rounder or more colorful. For home growing, they were completely unnecessary. I quietly dropped my confident act. With my money still needed for a safe house, I smiled and asked for her best value recommendations instead. She also warned me to buy small packets. Once opened, seeds go bad quickly if they get damp. I bought seeds for everything I could think of: spinach, cabbage, radish, coriander, lettuce, broccoli, green beans, celery, tomatoes, cucumber, pumpkin, carrot, and more. I also picked up some fruit seeds: strawberry, melon, and watermelon. Then I found a shop selling medicinal herb seeds and bought mugwort, mint, ginseng, and several others. I wasn't sure which ones I'd need, but better to be prepared. I spent several tens of thousands of yuan in total and left with bags full of seeds. On the drive home, I thought about how to sell the apartment. Selling the land rights to the Liu family had felt fine. They deserved it after what they did to me in my past life. But selling an apartment to a complete stranger and knowing the area would be hit by disaster didn't sit as easily with me. I was still thinking about it when I arrived back at the building entrance and overheard a conversation nearby. A property agent was talking to a young couple. The woman was upset. A flat she had wanted to buy had already been sold. She insisted this was the only building she wanted because it was walking distance from a top school and close to her boyfriend's workplace. Then I heard their names. The woman was called Qianqian. The man was called Yuan. Those names hit me like a cold wave. Unpleasant memories surfaced immediately. I stood quietly for a moment, then stepped forward. The woman was asking the agent if any other units in the building were available. The agent said no. Units here were extremely rare, and several buyers had been waiting for months. I have a flat here I'm looking to sell, I said. Are you two interested? The couple turned around, and I immediately recognized them. It was my ex-boyfriend Han Yuan and the girl he had cheated on me with by Qianqian. Han Yuan and I had dated in university. He pursued me and was sweet at first, but everything changed after he visited my home in the countryside during our second year. He saw the old house and said nothing at the time, but his attitude toward me turned cold almost immediately after. Within a week, I caught him kissing by Qianqian, a girl 1 year below us, from a comfortable city family. I broke up with him right away. But instead of apologizing, he blamed me, saying I wasn't as gentle and caring as Bai Qianqian. Then Bai Qianqian made things worse by posting a tearful article online claiming I was the one who had broken them up. She even paid some accounts to spread it further. Many people who didn't know the truth joined in and attacked me online.
It was a miserable time.
Now here they both were, looking at me in shock. Do you really have a flat here? Han Yuan asked, confused. But you grew up in the countryside. I smiled calmly. Yes, a fully paid 3-bedroom flat. If you want it, 400,000. Full payment only. Offer expires tomorrow. Bai Qianqian tried to soften me up, saying she had just been young and foolish back then. I cut her off. I had no time for that. I told them the price was fair for a fully renovated 140 square meter flat next to a top school and walked away. I wasn't counting entirely on them buying it. I gave them 1 day to decide, then posted on my social media, making sure they could see it, advertising the flat at 400 million, full payment only. I hoped the pressure would push them into deciding faster. The real reason I needed to sell quickly was to buy a villa I had already chosen as a safe house. A regular apartment wouldn't work. Not enough space or structural strength to store everything my family would need for the disasters ahead. I also couldn't keep everything in my secret space without the family noticing and asking questions. And after the tornado would come a long period of extreme heat. If we were in an apartment block trying to run generators and air conditioning, the neighbors would definitely notice. A villa was safer and more discreet. With the flat posted for sale, I took my seeds into my space and started planting sugarcane, cabbage, green beans, cucumber, chili, and more. The moment I finished, a message appeared. First planting complete. New areas unlocked. Peach Blossom Workshop, Peach Blossom Farm, Peach Blossom Forest. The white mist cleared further. A large factory appeared with all kinds of machinery. It could process crops into flour, sugar, animal feed, cloth, and more. Next to it was a clean, well-organized animal farm with feeding troughs and waste disposal systems. Across the stream was a forest full of trees, flowers, and birdsong. I would need to buy animals and fruit trees tomorrow. When I came out of the space, I found some new messages on my phone from my adoptive father, Li Yadong. He had left my adoptive mother when I was 7, cheating with a younger village woman, and eventually having 2 children with her. My mother had divorced him and raised me alone. I had little feeling for him. His messages made my eyebrows rise. He had seen my social media post about the flat. He was asking me to sell it to my half-brother Yaozhu for a discounted price of 600,000 and consider the remaining 340,000 a gift from an older sister to her brother. He added that since my mother had never remarried, Yaozhu was my only family on that side, and having a brother would protect me after I got married one day. I stared at the screen. This man had abandoned my mother and me, built a new family, and was now asking me to hand over most of a 400,000 flat to a brother I owed nothing to, and calling it family loyalty. I put my phone down and didn't reply. When I read my adoptive father's messages asking me to basically give away my flat, I nearly laughed out loud. He wanted me to transfer the flat to my half-brother's name, live in it while paying rent, and wait for my brother to slowly pay me back someday. He even said I should be grateful to have a brother to rely on. I was about to send him a very angry voice message when Grandma Lu came over and asked why I looked so upset. I explained everything, my adoptive father's scheme, and the fact that my ex-boyfriend Han Yuan still hadn't confirmed he wanted to buy. Grandma Lu quietly picked up my phone, deleted most of the conversation, and handed it back. What remained was just enough to look like my adoptive father had agreed to pay full price, and the sale was nearly done. I immediately understood her plan. I took a screenshot and posted it on my social media, visible only to Han Yuan and Bai Qianqian, with a caption saying the flat was almost sold to my brother and 4 million cash was on its way. Within minutes, Han Yuan messaged me saying he had made up his mind and wanted the flat. He asked to sign the contract the next day. Grandma Lu and I looked at each other and smiled. It worked. That evening at Han Yuan's home, his mother was actually annoyed he had decided so quickly. She thought I was desperate to sell, and the price might drop if they waited. But Han Yuan explained that Bai Qianqian was pregnant and threatening to end the pregnancy if they didn't have a home secured soon. He had no choice but to act fast. Han Yuan's mother sighed. She had once preferred me over Bai Qianqian, not out of any fondness for me, but because she had since realized Bai Qianqian was calculating underneath her sweet surface. Bai Qianqian's family was only contributing 1 million toward the flat, yet she insisted the deed be written in her name alone, and Han Yuan had agreed to it. His mother knew he would regret it someday. Han Yuan himself felt a small pang of regret too, wondering if things would have been different between us had he known my family owned a city flat. But it was too late for that. He talked himself out of it by reminding himself that I was too independent and strong-willed, not the type to make a comfortable wife. He called Bai Qianqian to confirm the money was ready, and they agreed to meet me the next morning. The following day they arrived with a property agent. Han Yuan's mother complained the moment she walked in, looking at all our packed boxes and calling them a mess. I told her flatly that we would be completely gone within 3 days of the money arriving, and not to worry. The agent showed them around, and they signed quickly. Bai Qianqian was quietly thrilled. The flat was in better condition than anything else she had seen at that price, and the deed would be in her name alone. The paperwork moved fast. By the morning of the 5th, 4 million yuan had landed in my account. Combined with the money from the Lu family, I now had over 10 million yuan. I could finally go and buy the safe house I had been planning for. With the flat sold, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. After breakfast, I told Grandma Lu not to wait up for me. I had a full day ahead buying fruit trees and animals. First, I drove back to Yuan Mountain. The mudslide had destroyed much of the orchard, but some trees had survived. My uncle had spent years carefully choosing and growing those trees, and in the apocalypse I had dreamed about them constantly. Fruit had become unimaginably expensive. Now, I carefully moved the surviving trees into my space one by one. Apple trees, peach trees, orange trees, apricot trees. The space accepted them all and immediately began helping them grow and bear fruit. While I was there, I spotted Lu Siming arriving with his project team to assess the damage. I quietly slipped away before they noticed me. The Lu family had been calling and messaging me nonstop. Even my birth father had sent a message listing all the advantages of returning to their family. I ignored every single one. After leaving the mountain, I stopped at a plant nursery and bought more fruit trees: cherry, grape, persimmon, kiwi, lychee, and others. I loaded them into my truck to look normal, then moved them all into my space when no one was watching. Next, I drove to a chicken farm run by my university friend Zhang Lei, who had studied animal science. He was one of the few people who had stood up for me when my ex-boyfriend and Bai Qianqian had spread lies about me online. I trusted him. When I arrived, Zhang Lei told me he was actually planning to close the farm and had already been accepted into a livestock veterinary research institute in the city. I quietly felt relieved. In the coming disasters, farms would be hit hard by extreme heat and power cuts, but veterinary research institutes would become vital for rebuilding. He had made exactly the right choice without even knowing it. He helped me select a mix of chickens and ducks, meat chickens, egg-laying hens, and free-range birds, and loaded them into my truck. Then he took me to a farmer who sold sheep and pigs. The old farmer proudly showed off his free-range mountain goats, 2 large rams and 5 ewes, and a rare heritage breed of small pigs that he said were once a tribute item in ancient times, delicious and unlike ordinary pork. I bought them all without hesitation. I also spotted rabbit hutches around the back and asked for some rabbits. Zhang advised me to only take 2 or 3. Rabbits breed so fast I would quickly have more than I could manage. The farmer generously threw in 3 rabbits for free. Finally, Zhang took me to a cattle cooperative where I bought 5 calves and 3 adult cows, a good mix of males and females for breeding. The cooperative owner, pleased by how quickly I paid, threw in a large supply of feed as well. Since the cattle were too big for my small truck, I arranged to come back the next day with a larger vehicle. With Zhang Lei's help, I had bought chickens, ducks, cows, sheep, pigs, and rabbits all in one day. I spent about 200,000 yuan in total and felt completely satisfied. By evening, I had moved all the animals, chickens, ducks, rabbits, sheep, and pigs into my space. The space had already settled them neatly into the farm. The crops I had planted just 2 days earlier had already sprouted, which amazed me every time. Late that night, I checked on everything in the space, fed the animals, and went to sleep. I had a big day ahead. Before I get to that, I should mention what was happening with the Liu family. Liu Ximing had confirmed that the Yuan mountain project was a total loss after 3 days of assessment. My birth father was annoyed but told everyone to focus on a different resort project instead. My birth mother assumed I was avoiding their calls out of guilt over the mudslide. My birth brother Liu Xiyuan called me a bad omen. My birth father told everyone to leave me alone for a few days and let me come to my senses on my own. None of that was on my mind. I had too much to do. On the morning of the 6th, I left Grandma Liu at home and asked her to let the family know about the flat sale when they returned that afternoon, so they would be mentally prepared. We would move to the new place the next day. I drove to a housing complex called Xian on the outskirts of the city. Xian had been built a few years ago when developers expected a new city center to be planned nearby. That never happened, so the area stayed quiet and the properties had barely sold. Most people saw it as too remote. But I knew exactly what it was worth. In my past life, when disasters hit, Xian turned out to be one of the safest places in the entire city. It sat on high ground with a mountain behind it and open land for growing food. The security and property management there were unusually good, and the crime rate during the apocalypse was the lowest in the area. It was officially named the most stable residential zone in the city and became one of the key recovery zones afterwards. I had lived there briefly during the apocalypse after. The Liu family's villa was buried in snow, and I had always remembered my birth parents saying they wished they had bought a villa there when they had the chance. Now I walked straight into the sales office. A young salesman named Xiao He greeted me warmly and recommended a villa called B16 at 7 million yuan. I raised my eyebrows. It was a lot for the outskirts. He explained that the original owner had paid 8 million and spent another 3 million on renovations, but had never lived there and was now emigrating urgently and needed to sell quickly. He drove me over for a look and walked me through the features. The villa had its own independent power generator with upgraded electrical capacity, enough to run any number of appliances. The air conditioning used the latest high-temperature cooling technology, designed to keep working even in extreme heat when ordinary air conditioners would break down. There was also a full central water purification system and a direct drinking water system. The more I saw, the more I wanted it. It was almost perfectly suited for what I needed, especially that air conditioning system, which would be essential when the extreme heat arrived in just over a month. I was ready to buy. Xiao He took me through the whole villa. The ground floor had a living room, kitchen, dining room, storage room, bathroom, and 2 small staff rooms. The second floor had 4 bedrooms, 2 with balconies for the main residence and 2 smaller ones. The third floor had more guest bedrooms. The real highlight was the basement. It had a double garage big enough for 2 large SUVs, an indoor swimming pool with an automatic cleaning system, and 4 large unfinished rooms that the previous owner had planned to turn into a study, cinema, lounge, and gym. The wiring was already done. They just never finished before deciding to move abroad. In my eyes, those 4 unfinished rooms were 4 enormous storage spaces. And the swimming pool? Perfect for storing water. I told Xiaohe I was buying it. He looked like he couldn't believe his luck. We went back to the office. I signed the contract and paid the full 7 million in one transfer. Because there was no loan to arrange, the paperwork moved quickly and I had the keys in hand before long. I went straight to the property management office with a bag of fruit as a gift and asked for a recommendation for a trustworthy renovation company. They gave me a name and I called immediately. The team arrived quickly. I laid out everything I needed. The front and back gardens were to be fully enclosed with a reinforced roof. The walls needed to be strengthened with steel plating, strong enough that a car couldn't break through, with an electric fence added on top. The roof needed space prepared for solar panels. The back garden would become a greenhouse with shatterproof glass. A large water tank with a filtration system was to be built in the back garden. The electrical system needed to be inspected and upgraded if needed to handle heavy usage. The renovation team leader looked at me like I was strange. He muttered something about never understanding what wealthy people wanted. But I didn't need him to understand, I just needed him to build it. He immediately started calling his team, ordering materials, and planning the work. Within a short while, several workers had arrived and were already discussing designs. I also asked Xiaohe if he could stay and supervise the work for the day since I couldn't be there myself. He agreed happily. The sale had earned him a good commission, and there were no other customers to attend to. With the renovation underway and Xiaohe watching over things, I returned the small truck and picked up a large one, then drove to the cattle cooperative to collect the 8 cows I had ordered the day before. Once I found a quiet spot, I moved them all into my space. Then I drove straight to the wholesale market. It was time to start stocking supplies in earnest. The first stop was a bottled water factory. I told them I was opening a rural guest house and ordered 200 cases of mineral water and 100 large water jugs. As I moved them into my space, the system spoke up for the first time in a while. "Host, why are you buying so much water? The peach blossom stream provides clean, natural water in unlimited supply." I remembered the burning thirst of the apocalypse all too well. I told the system I had originally planned to buy even more from another supplier, but hearing that, I would stop here. I still bought a few distillation devices just in case. After the water, I headed to the city's largest food and grocery wholesale market. I spent the whole day buying supplies at the wholesale markets, moving everything quietly into my space whenever no one was looking. First, I went to a canned food wholesaler. I bought 200 boxes of meat tins, beef, luncheon meat, fish, pork trotters, curry chicken, and every variety of fruit tin I could find. I remembered from my past life that in the 3rd year of the apocalypse, my birth brother had spent over 8,000 yuan on a single tin of bayberries just to make Lu Xixua happy. This time, my family would be able to eat whatever they wanted. I also bought 200 boxes of compressed biscuits, instant self-heating rice, and self-heating hot pots. At lunchtime, I slipped into my space, opened a tin of fish and a self-heating rice, and ate a proper warm meal alone. I finished with a tin of chilled yellow peaches. It was simple but delicious. In the afternoon, I went to the grain and oil market. I bought thousands of kilograms of cooking oil, sunflower, rapeseed, corn, then thousands more of rice, flour, and corn, all vacuum-packed in small portions. Then I bought bags of mixed grains, soybeans, oats, mung beans, red beans, black beans, peanuts, lotus seeds, and more. After that, I stocked up on seasonings, salt, sugar, soy sauce, vinegar, chili paste, curry paste, braising spice packs, and various sauces. Another 200 boxes. The last stop was the snack wholesale market. I told them I was opening a small shop and bought everything I saw: bread, cakes, biscuits, instant noodles, sausages, rice noodles, dried tofu, jelly, chocolate, chips, juice, cola, milk, yogurt, and sparkling water. I bought over 100 boxes of milk alone, across several brands. By the time I was done, it was dark. I had spent several 100,000 yuan that day, with snacks costing the most. I had about 2 million left. When I got home, my family had returned from visiting my cousin Zian. Grandma Lu had already told them about the flat sale and the new villa. They were shocked that I had done so much in just a few days. I told them calmly that a tornado was coming early next month and this area was directly in its path. We had to move. My mother looked uncertain. There had been no weather warnings and it all seemed very sudden. I told her to wait until the end of the month when the government would issue an official warning. My aunt reminded everyone that I had already correctly predicted the mudslide. That settled it. Everyone agreed to move. That evening we had a warm family dinner. My uncle and aunt told me how happy Zian had been to receive the home-cured meats and supplies. He had said he missed everyone and would come home when he got a longer break. I listened and felt a quiet happiness settle in my chest. This time, I would keep everyone safe. That night my mother held me back and asked what was really going on with me. I hugged her and promised to explain everything properly after the move tomorrow. She then asked if Li Yadong, my adoptive father, had really contacted me. I told her everything, including his plan to have me transfer the flat to his son's name and pay rent to live in my own home. My mother's face went cold. She had worked herself to exhaustion building that family up from nothing, only to be deceived for years while he spent her money on another woman. After the divorce, she had never remarried, and she had changed my surname to hers and raised me with her own family. Now, years later, he was still trying to take things from her. "Don't worry, Mum," I said softly, hugging her. "Li Yadong and his family won't have easy days ahead." I knew exactly what was coming. The house he lived in with his other family sat in a flood zone. Even if they survived the heat and the cold, the floods would take everything. Whatever he had taken from my mother, he wouldn't be able to keep it. We fell asleep leaning against each other. On the morning of the 7th, we called the moving company again. Having done it once already, everything went much faster this time. Just as we were finishing up, Bai Qianqian and Han Yuan arrived to look at their new flat. Bai Qianqian was already talking about ripping out windows and redecorating everything. I briefly thought about warning her not to change the windows, but when she immediately assumed I was being spiteful, and Han Yuan took her side, I decided to let them make their own choices. Bai Qianqian then told me she was pregnant, and added sweetly that she hoped I would stop chasing Han Yuan. I told her calmly that I never take back rubbish, and that they were perfectly suited for each other. Then I left. We arrived at the new villa in Xiandu. I thanked Xiao He for supervising the renovation work and sent him home with a red envelope. The family was immediately impressed by the size of the place, though my grandmother was puzzled about why the garden had been enclosed. I promised her she could still grow vegetables inside. I showed everyone around the ground floor living areas, the bedrooms on the 2nd and 3rd floors, and the basement. I gave my grandmother and Grandma Lu the most accessible rooms on the 2nd floor. Everyone else could choose from the many spare rooms. That evening, once we were all settled, I sat the family down and finally told them the truth, that I was the biological daughter of the Lu family, switched at birth. Everyone went silent with shock. My uncle asked if I was going back to them. Before my mother could react, I held her hand firmly and said no. I explained that the Lu family had not been kind when I met them. Their fake daughter had immediately been hostile toward me. My birth parents had sided with her and scolded me, and their son had called me a country girl. They did not care about me. They just did not want their blood daughter living outside their household. My grandmother pulled me into her arms and cried. She said no one would ever hurt me while she was around. Grandma Lu shook her head quietly and said parents that unfair were rare, even among the selfish. Once everyone calmed down, I moved on to the more important matter. I told them that a nationwide tornado was coming in early April, followed by more serious disasters. That was why we needed to stay together in this villa and finish the renovations. I asked my uncle and aunt not to rush out and buy a flat. If they accidentally bought in a danger zone, their life savings would be gone. They should stay here until things settled. Everyone agreed, including my aunt who had been feeling awkward about staying too long. My grandmother and Grandma Lu would plan the garden. My mother and uncle would supervise the renovation work. My aunt would keep working at the factory for now. That night, I went into my space to check on everything. The vegetables had grown noticeably. The cabbage was large, the sugarcane much taller, and the chili plants were nearly fruiting. I used the processing workshop for the first time, turning corn and sugarcane into animal feed. The animals were delighted, especially the 10 piglets who finished their share in seconds. Then the system gave me a small but exciting update. 2 female rabbits are pregnant. I happily pulled a cabbage from the garden and gave the rabbits an extra meal. Then I went to sleep, deeply tired but quietly content. The next morning my aunt went back to work, my mother and uncle supervised the renovation team, and my grandmother and grandma Lu planned the garden. I drove to the clothing wholesale market. I had asked everyone their sizes the night before. I bought enough underwear and pajamas for all 6 of us across every season. Thinking of the long freezing winters ahead, I also bought thick fleece thermal suits and military-style padded coats. For my grandmother and Grandma Lu, I forced myself to spend over 10,000 yuan each on fur coats, painful on the wallet but essential for surviving severe cold. I also stocked up on hats, gloves, ear warmers, goggles, raincoats, and rain boots for the acid rain I remembered from the 3rd year of the apocalypse. The shop owner gave me a 20% discount. Total, over 200,000 yuan. After that I spent 6 hours quietly visiting nearly every pharmacy in the city, buying a little from each so as not to raise suspicion. By the end I had large stocks of alcohol, bandages, fever medicine, antibiotics, stomach medicine, heart medicine, allergy medicine, insulin, vitamins, and more. Then I went to the daily goods wholesale market and bought hundreds of packs of toilet paper, tissues, wet wipes, sanitary products, soap, shampoo, shower gel, laundry detergent, toothpaste, toothbrushes, and towels. I knew from experience that once factories stopped operating during the disasters, these everyday items would disappear from shelves entirely. I also bought simple flat-pack storage shelves for the basement. I realized I had been storing everything neatly in my space, but had nothing organized in the actual house. On the way home, I stopped at a hardware store and bought fire axes, multi-purpose folding shovels, 3 full toolkits, and dozens of fire extinguishers. 1 for every room. The store owner threw in some anti-toxic spray and emergency whistles as a bonus. By the time I got home, it was dark. The family had waited dinner for me: braised beef, fish, aubergine, stir-fried vegetables, tomato and egg prawns. My aunt filled my bowl to the top. The renovation was on track. My grandmother told me she and Grandma Lu had planned out the garden, including a small pond in the back for water storage, irrigation, and fish. I told her I had plenty of seeds ready for her. After dinner, I went down to the basement and set up the storage shelves, organizing all the supplies by category. It looked neat and satisfying. Then I went into my space to feed the animals. The chickens that had been let loose in the forest were laying eggs faster. The ducks were sitting on eggs and would hatch soon. Before bed, I saw a message from my birth mother. She said Lu Xixue had personally picked out an expensive necklace for me while they were shopping. She hoped I would come home and let Lu Xixue put it on me herself. I recognized that necklace immediately. In my past life, Lu Xixue had broken it herself and blamed me for destroying it. My birth mother had refused to believe my explanation no matter what I said. I turned on the Do Not Disturb setting for her messages and went to sleep. The next day, I went to an outdoor survival equipment store. I bought helmets, goggles, compasses, binoculars, gas masks, waterproof matches, not lighters, since I clearly remembered them exploding in the extreme heat, portable wood-burning stoves, alcohol fuel, batteries, power banks, storage batteries, sleeping bags, tents, life rings, life jackets, and inflatable boats. The shop owner joked that I was preparing for an apocalypse. I casually asked her what else someone would need if there really were floods or a mass evacuation. She thought about it seriously and said at minimum an off-road vehicle or camper van and a proper boat rather than an inflatable one for serious flooding. I sighed. I still had about 1 million yuan left, and I still needed to buy generators and fuel, plus cover the remaining renovation costs. I had no budget for a vehicle at all. We had left the family's old car behind in the mudslide since it had been breaking down constantly and cost more to repair than it was worth. I sat in the rental truck staring at my bank balance, wondering where I could find more money. Then my phone rang. The unknown number turned out to be Lu Sishua. Hearing her voice sent a chill through me. I was about to hang up when she begged me to listen for just a moment, saying our birth mother was upset and worried about me. I wasn't fooled. I knew exactly why Lu Sishua was calling. Rumors were spreading that she wasn't the real Lu daughter, and my birth mother's longing for me was making the family's attention shift. Lu Sishua wanted me back, so she could set me up and make everyone disappointed in me, just like last time. She tried to suggest I was avoiding the family because of the Yuan mountain mudslide. I cut her off. I told her plainly that the only reason I wasn't coming back was because of her, and since she had once offered to leave, why was she still there? Then I hung up. I had generators to buy. I drove to an energy equipment market and told a shop owner I was purchasing for an outdoor company. I bought 10 petrol generators and 10 diesel generators, both large high-power models and small portable ones. In my past life, generators had been sold for millions of yuan during the energy crisis. Right now they cost between 2,000 and 10,000 each. I bought 20 without hesitation. I also bought 5 wind turbine sets and 15 large solar panel systems. The shop owner was delighted with such a big order and patiently taught me how to install and use everything before loading it all onto my truck. Next, I needed fuel. Diesel was straightforward. I collected it across several suppliers without any trouble. Petrol was harder. Petrol stations refused to sell in bulk containers. So I came up with another method. I filled the truck's tank at one station, then transferred the fuel into empty containers in my space. I repeated this across nearly every station in the city and even drove to stations in the surrounding county towns. By the end, I had stored 9,000 liters of diesel and 9,000 liters of petrol. That should keep the generators running for a good while. I slumped back in my seat, exhausted but relieved. The bulk of my preparations were finally done. I had about 600,000 yuan left, just enough to pay the renovation team. I didn't want to borrow money. In my past life, the government had audited everyone's assets and debts in the first year of the apocalypse, and families with loans had assets seized. The Lu family had lost nearly everything that way. I stretched and felt the tension in my body ease for the first time in days. The vehicle situation, off-road cars, a proper boat, a camper van, would have to wait until I had more money. Just then my phone rang again. It was Lu Siming. In a good mood now that my preparations were complete, I answered. He was furious. He said I had told Lu Sishua to leave the house, and now she had run away from home, and the whole family was panicking. He demanded I call her, apologize, and beg her to come back. He warned me that if anything happened to her, the Lu family would never forgive me. I smiled. Then please never forgive me, I said cheerfully. If she's missing, report it to the police. I'm not an officer. I hung up and drove home in excellent spirits. I got home in a great mood to find everyone busy. My mother and uncle were still supervising the renovation. In the garden, my grandmother and Grandma Lu were happily planting seeds. I went down to the basement and finished organizing the last of the supplies, outdoor gear on one side, generators and fuel containers on the other. Then I went into my space to tend to everything there. The crops were growing well. I built climbing frames for the beans and cucumbers using bamboo from the forest, watered the fields, and pruned the young fruit trees the way my uncle had taught me. After that, I processed corn, soybeans, and sugarcane into animal feed and went around the farm filling every trough. The hens were laying eggs and sitting on them. The ducks were still splashing around happily in their pools. The pregnant rabbits hid nervously in a pile of grass when they saw me coming. The little pigs had visibly grown bigger and rushed to the trough the moment I arrived. The cows were calmly grazing in their large paddock and wandered over without any hurry. I also added salt mineral blocks to the cattle and sheep pens after reading in Zhang Lei's notes that these animals need extra salt. Afterwards, I walked slowly along the stream with the white cat, feeling more at ease than I had in days. I looked at the white mist still covering the far parts of the space and asked why those areas hadn't unlocked yet. The cat shook itself and replied, "The remaining areas require money to unlock." "A lot of money." I froze. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" I've spent almost everything I had, I said, close to tears. I have about 600,000 left. Is that enough? The cat shook its head. Not enough. How much does the next area cost? 100 million yuan. I stared in silence. Oh, I finally said. Never mind then. I walked out of the space feeling thoroughly defeated. Meanwhile, at the Song family villa, after leaving the Liu house, Liu Xixue had gone straight to her fiancé Song Yuhan. She told him everything, that she wasn't the Liu family's biological daughter and that the real daughter had been found. She had calculated this move carefully. Rumors were already spreading outside, and the Liu family's attitude made it clear they were serious about bringing me back. Rather than let someone else break the news, she chose to tell him herself and control the story. She leaned against him with tears barely held back, an expression she had practiced many times in the mirror, and told him their engagement should be called off, that she wasn't worthy of him, and that the real Liu daughter was who he should marry. Song Yuhan held her and said none of that mattered. She had been raised by the Liu family, and that was enough. He said firmly that regardless of bloodlines, he only wanted her and that the Song family would only accept her as a daughter-in-law. He even offered to have his parents speak to the Liu family to make that position clear, and suggested they speed up the wedding so she could stop worrying. Liu Xixue quietly let out a breath of relief. That was exactly what she had come to hear. She looked up at her handsome, wealthy fiancé, smiled softly, and kissed him. Feeling deflated about the 100 million needed to unlock the next space area, I went back to my room and checked my phone. The property management had invited me to join 2 group chats, one for the whole estate and one just for villa owners. The villa group was quiet. The main estate group was lively, with people chatting and organizing group purchases. I posted a simple message warning everyone that strong winds were expected in a few weeks and suggested they secure their windows and clear anything off their balconies that could fall. Then I went to the kitchen and filled the empty cupboards with food for my space. Seeing them well-stocked settled my nerves. Back on my phone, I noticed a friend request from an unknown number. Assuming it was a neighbor, I accepted. The person immediately sent a photo of a beautiful seaside villa. Then came the message. It was Liu Xixue. She said she had left home as promised, but then Liu Siming and our birth mother had come running after her and told her she would always be family. Liu Siming had given her a seaside villa to comfort her. She hoped I wasn't angry. I stared at the screen. Then I looked more carefully at the villa in the photo and laughed out loud. I recognized it immediately. It was part of the Liu Group's major investment project, the Xinhai Seaside Resort. In about 2 weeks, while a tornado hit inland, a typhoon and tsunami would hit the coast. That resort would be completely destroyed. It was the project that would drag the Liu Group straight into bankruptcy. Liu Siming had given Liu Xixue a gift that was about to become worthless rubble. I didn't reply to her. I went back to the estate group chat and found several neighbors had responded to my wind warning. Some said they would contact the property office about their windows. Others were already planning to upgrade them. One person did accuse me of being a fake renovation company trying to get business. I ignored that. My warning was out there. Whether people listened was up to them. Meanwhile, things were moving at the Song family villa. Liu Xixue's dramatic exit from the Liu house had worked perfectly. My birth mother was so shaken by it that she decided to delay any plans to bring me home, afraid of upsetting Liu Xixue again. At the Song family villa, Song Yuhan tried to push his mother to set a wedding date that same evening. His mother deflected, saying it was too late at night and that Liu Xixue's family must be worried. After Liu Xixue and my birth mother left, Song Yuhan's mother told him plainly that his father believed wealthy family alliances were built on bloodlines, and since Liu Xixue wasn't a Liu by blood, she wasn't the right match. Song Yuhan refused to consider me as an alternative, describing me as an uneducated country girl with no manners. He argued that Liu Xixue had been raised and shaped by the Liu family and was everything a good wife should be. His mother was caught in the middle. She personally preferred Liu Xixue too, but the decision rested with Song Yuhan's father. She suggested they all go to the Liu family for dinner soon, so his father could see both of us in person. If I really was as unsuitable as Song Yuhan said, his father would likely change his mind. None of this concerned me at all. I had more important things to think about. Over the next 2 days, I checked my supply lists online and filled any gaps. My mother suggested installing security cameras around the villa, and my uncle added iron spikes and broken glass along the top of the walls. The renovation was coming along well. On the third day, while I was watering crops in my space, my birth mother called and asked if I could come for dinner that evening. I agreed. My supplies were mostly sorted now, and I wanted to go and say what needed to be said clearly and once and for all so they would stop contacting me. In my past life, I had cared for those people through years of disasters. I considered that my repayment for being born to them. They had in turn helped destroy me, and this time around I had taken 6.4 million from them. I felt we were even. They had less than a year before the Lu Group went bankrupt anyway. I didn't need to do anything. Life would handle them. Before I left, my mother and grandmother mentioned they were making grilled fish for dinner. I told them I'd be back as soon as I could. My mother's face fell slightly. My grandmother patted her arm and said she had nothing to worry about. Arriving at the Lu villa made my stomach turn. I breathed through it and walked in. In the garden, Lu Yuan sneered at me. I walked past without slowing down and told him his rudeness was as consistent as ever. Lucky for me, we weren't really family. He nearly grabbed me but stopped himself because there were guests inside. I quietly released my grip on the electric shock device in my pocket. I had bought a few at the outdoor store, normally used to deter wild boars, and had been hoping to test one on him. Another time, perhaps. Inside the living room, I stopped short. The Song family was there too. In my past life, Song Yuhan's father had immediately pushed to have the engagement transferred from Lu Xixue to me the moment he found out about the mix-up. His wife had quietly preferred Lu Xixue but hadn't dared oppose her husband. Song Yuhan himself had taken out his frustration on me, spreading rumors among his wealthy friends that I was chasing him, which caused a crowd of rich girls to make my life difficult at every turn. My birth parents had later blamed me for failing to win the Song family over and even blamed me for the Lu Group's eventual bankruptcy. Seeing all of them together made my mood drop even further. My birth mother introduced me to the Song parents. Both of them looked visibly impressed the moment they saw me. I had inherited my birth mother's looks and was taller than Lu Xixue. Song Yuhan's father made up his mind on the spot. For him, a daughter-in-law needed good bloodlines and a presentable appearance, and I had both. He told Song Yuhan to go and introduce himself. Song Yuhan looked at Lu Xixue's pale face and quietly protested. His father silenced him with a look. "There's no need," I said. I had come here with one purpose. I looked at my birth parents and spoke clearly. I have my own family, and I am happy with them. I am never coming back to the Lu house. I considered asking you to sign a formal document cutting ties, but on reflection, I don't need that either. As far as the world is concerned, your daughter has always been Lu Xixue. Officially linking myself to the Lu family would only create complications I don't want. So let us simply agree to act as though we never met. From today, I want nothing to do with the Lu family. The room went silent after I spoke. Everyone stared. My birth mother burst into tears, telling me to stop throwing tantrums out of jealousy toward Lu Xixue. My birth father slammed the table and demanded to know who had raised me to speak to my own parents this way. I ignored them both and turned to Song Yuhan's father instead. I told him that for someone who placed so much importance on bloodlines, he seemed remarkably confident that his own children and grandchildren were all biologically his. His face turned a deep, angry red. Then I walked out. At the door, Lu Xiyuan reached out to grab my hair. Before he could touch me, I pressed the electric shock device against him. He let out a cry and collapsed sideways, his arm and half his body going numb and then burning with pain. I checked briefly that he was conscious, put the device back in my pocket, and left quickly. On the way home, I thought about Lu Xixue and Song Yuhan. In my past life, they had been passionately in love, but when the disasters hit and the Lu Group collapsed, the Song family cut their losses and pulled away. Both families eventually lost most of their wealth. Freed from family obligations, Lu Xixue had moved on without hesitation and started pursuing a man named Xiao Huifeng, whose family had grown rich through seawater desalination technology during the water crisis. Zhao Huifeng barely acknowledged her until she obtained the space and developed the plague cure. It was only after that, after she had the Lu family back on its feet, that he accepted her as his girlfriend. And it was at Lu Xixue and Zhao Huifeng's direction that I had been handed over to the criminal organization in that life. I arrived home still turning all this over in my mind. It was late. I expected everyone to be asleep, but my mother was sitting alone on the sofa in the living room. "Mom, why aren't you in bed?" She gave a flustered answer about just about to go up. I felt a sharp ache in my chest. I crossed the room and hugged her tightly. "Were you waiting for me? Were you afraid I wasn't coming back?" She pulled back and started saying that the Lu family had so much more to offer me: resources, connections, opportunities. That going back to them might be better for my future. I stopped her. I told her I hadn't gone to dinner. I had gone to tell them clearly and finally that I would never return to the Lu house. I had even wanted a formal written statement cutting ties, because I wanted absolutely nothing to do with them. My mother looked surprised by how firm I was. She said they were still my birth parents, that blood was blood. "They are not my parents," I said simply. "I already have my own mother. I don't need anyone else's." I also told her what had really happened that evening, that I had arrived to find the Song family already there, ready to look me over as a potential bride for their son. No one had warned me or asked me. In their eyes, I was a commodity to be traded. "Mom, a family like that will never care about my well-being. In their eyes, I am a bargaining chip, not a person. Whatever they could offer me, it would always come with a price I'm not willing to pay." Then I added with a smile that I hadn't eaten a single bite all evening, and that a family who had never fed me a meal in my life had no business calling themselves my parents. My mother immediately stood up and went to the kitchen. A little while later, I was sitting at the table with a bowl of hot noodles, clear broth, fresh greens, crispy pan-fried meat rolls, and a soft runny egg. I ate every bite quickly, properly hungry for the first time all day. Grandma Lu had heard the noise and come downstairs too. She quietly pulled my mother aside and told her that the bond between parent and child was written by fate. What was meant to be hers couldn't be taken away, and what was taken would always come back. She told my mother to stop worrying so much, because her anxiety was hard on me too. My mother wiped her eyes and nodded. She promised she would stop letting her imagination run away with her. After I left, both families were left in stunned, angry silence. Song Yuhan's father was shaking. No man wanted to be publicly hinted at that his children might not be his. His wife was equally furious, but had to maintain her composure as a wealthy lady. Song Yuhan himself had prepared a whole speech to reject me, expecting I would chase after him, and I hadn't even glanced at him. The Song family left quickly, without saying goodbye properly. Back at the Lu house, my birth mother cried and couldn't understand why I had spoken that way. Lu Xiyuan, still numb and aching from the shock device, muttered that I was just playing hard to get, that my old home was so run down I would obviously want to come back. Lu Xixue was confused about whether to feel relieved or worried. My birth father sat in cold silence before finally saying I had been raised wrong and couldn't be counted on. Lu Ximing tried to reassure everyone that I would come crawling back once the money ran out. My birth father eventually made a decision. He told Lu Xixue to work on advancing the wedding date with Song Yuhan. He also planned to spread a story that Lu Xixue was the real Lu daughter and that I was merely an illegitimate child the family had kept quietly in the countryside. That way the rumors about Lu Xixue's identity would be buried. He wasn't ready to fully cut me off. He still believed I would come back eventually, but he needed Lu Xixue to secure the Song family connection first. Lu Ximing sat quietly, with a dark expression. He had been the one spreading the rumors about Lu Xixue not being the real daughter, hoping to push the engagement toward me. Now that plan had fallen apart completely. He would have to think of something else. My birth mother felt a pang of guilt about calling me an illegitimate child, but said nothing. At the Song house, Song Yuhan told his parents that the evening had proved Lu Xixue was far more suitable than me. His father snapped back that they shouldn't have announced the engagement so early. There were plenty of good matches in the world without being tied to the Lu family. His father went to his study and sat thinking for a long time. Then he called his assistant and quietly ordered 2 urgent paternity tests. My parting words had planted a seed of doubt he simply couldn't ignore. Back home, I went up to my space after eating. The chili and cabbage were nearly ready to harvest. The cucumbers and beans were climbing all over their frames. At this growth rate, my family would never go hungry for vegetables. There would even be enough to sell. I harvested some cabbage and processed more animal feed from soybeans and corn, stacking it in the warehouse for later. The pigs, cows, and sheep were eating a lot, and I made a mental note to buy more grain soon. Then the white cat came over with news. "Host, the female cow and female sheep are both pregnant. Please give them extra feed." I was delighted. I immediately got out another bag of feed for the expectant mothers. I had been reading animal husbandry books lately and had been quite alarmed by all the diseases and risks involved in raising livestock. But the space reassured me. The peach blossom space was a natural purification system, and nothing inside it could get sick. That was a relief I hadn't expected, and a bigger one than I could fully express. With the tornado getting closer, I spent my days tending to the space and keeping busy. Chicks had started hatching in the space. The temperature adjusted itself perfectly. The pregnant cow and sheep grazed peacefully on their own little lawns. The small pigs had grown noticeably, and their black coats shone. I decided to let them breed first before slaughtering any for meat. The 2 pregnant rabbits were nestled deep in their hay, making soft purring sounds. They were clearly close to giving birth. The sugarcane had fully ripened. I cut some, tasted it, wonderfully sweet, and processed the rest into sugar in the workshop. I also made cardboard boxes from timber and produced tofu and soy milk from soybeans. I downloaded recipes online and told the white cat confidently that once the chilies ripened, we would make our own chili sauce. The only thing still worrying me was how to unlock the remaining space areas. 100 million yuan felt impossibly far away. That morning I came downstairs to find the renovation team packing up. The work was done. The walls were reinforced with steel plating, strong enough to stop a truck. The garden cooling system was installed. The greenhouse glass was double-layered and shatterproof. The solar panel mounting points were prepared and wired. 2 extra water tanks had been added. The back garden pond was dug. The basement swimming pool had been converted into a water reservoir, and a double water purification system was in place. I went to pay, but was told an elderly woman had already settled the bill. I was confused. My grandmother didn't have that kind of money. She had been scammed out of nearly all her savings years ago and had refused to keep large amounts ever since. Grandma Lu came downstairs just then. She told me calmly that she couldn't live there for free and to consider it rent. When I protested, she pulled me aside, took out a bank card, and pressed it into my hand. It had 800,000 yuan on it, money she had saved over the years from translation work and investments. She told me to use all of it. She said she wasn't blind. She had seen me rushing in and out buying everything imaginable, and she knew something big was coming. If the world was about to change, money would lose its value anyway, and she would rather it be spent on things that mattered. She told me firmly that in return, I was responsible for looking after her in old age, so I had better spend every last yuan properly. I accepted, deeply moved. With my own 600,000 and her 800,000, I had about 1.4 million left. I spent the next few days on the final round of purchases. First, I bought 9 large commercial freezers, then filled them with vacuum-packed meat, frozen dumplings, ice cream, and other frozen foods, enough to last the early disaster period. Total cost, 150,000 yuan. Everything went straight into my space. Then I went to a car dealership and bought an SUV for 300,000 and an off-road vehicle for 400,000, both paid in full, ready for collection in 2 days. After that, I made another exhausting round of petrol stations, collecting 9,000 liters of petrol and 9,000 liters of diesel the same way as before. I also bought more generators. By evening, I was worn out but satisfied. I returned the rental truck with some reluctance. It had been a faithful companion. With the remaining 300,000, I ordered humidifiers online for the dry heat ahead, then went to the shopping mall to buy sunscreen and skincare products for the whole family. In extreme cold, the skin cracks badly without moisture, and in the scorching heat ahead, the sun would be brutal. I bought 3 years' worth of supplies for 6 people across several counters. The shop assistants were thrilled and loaded me with free samples. I was in a good mood, browsing happily, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Little sister." My stomach dropped. I turned around. Of course. It was Lu Xixue. Lu Xixue was with 2 friends. One was Xia Wenhui, a quiet girl who followed Lu Xixue around at social events to gain access to wealthy circles. The other was Hiqing, the daughter of a rich family, dripping in designer clothes and jewelry, with a cold and superior manner. Hiqing looked at me and asked Lu Xixue if I was the illegitimate daughter raised in the countryside. Illegitimate daughter. So that was the story the Lu family had decided to spread. Since I had refused to come home, and Lu Xixue still needed her place secured, the Lu family couldn't admit she wasn't their real daughter. So instead they were telling people I was a secret child kept quietly in the village, that way both of us could technically be theirs. I thought about what Hiqing had done to me in my past life, inviting me to swim, then holding my head underwater without letting go. I had barely escaped. When I reported it to the police, Lu Xixue stood as a witness and claimed nothing had happened. The Lu family believed Lu Xixue completely. Lu Xiyuan had even tried to drag me to Hiqing to apologize. Hiqing should be grateful it wasn't the apocalypse yet. I turned to Lu Xixue calmly. "Illegitimate daughter? Then why do I look so much like your mother Suilan? And if you're the real daughter, why do you look nothing like anyone in that family?" Lu Xixue went pale. Her 2 friends fell silent, still processing what I had said. Lu Xixue quickly grabbed them both and left without another word. My good mood was ruined. I finished up at the mall quickly, buying 5 high-spec laptops, large storage drives to fill with TV series and films, 3 gaming consoles for the family, and spare phones and tablets for everyone. I left with about 80,000 yuan remaining. Back home, I handed out the skincare and sunscreen, telling everyone the mall had a sale, and I had stocked up for 3 years. My uncle and aunt insisted on paying me back. I refused. My grandmother examined all the little bottles with great curiosity, while my mother and grandma Lu showed her how to use them. After dinner, I went to the basement and set up all 9 freezers, filling them neatly with meat, frozen food, and ice cream. The next morning, my mother and uncle told me they wanted to find work. They felt restless doing nothing while my aunt was the only one bringing in income. I told them to wait until April, which disappointed them, so I gave them something useful to do instead. I suggested my mother buy fish and shrimp fingerlings for the back garden pond, and asked my uncle to find young fruit trees that could bear fruit the same year. Both of them brightened immediately and headed out. I watched them go, knowing I was just buying time. The tornado was arriving on the 1st of April. I needed everyone at home by then, including my aunt, whose factory I couldn't remember was in the danger zone or not. Better safe than sorry. I went for a walk around the estate. I noticed several renovation workers carrying window frames and glass panels upstairs. It looked like my warning in the group chat had reached some people. The estate was still quiet overall, with very few residents compared to its size. I wandered through the villa area, the residential blocks, and eventually into the small commercial zone. There were only a handful of shops, a few restaurants, a clothing store, a temporarily closed pharmacy, a supermarket, a fresh food shop, a hair salon, a pet shop, a gym, and a dry cleaner. I stopped at the supermarket. A sign on the glass door read, "Business for sale." I pushed the door open and went in. I walked into the supermarket and immediately recognized the girl behind the counter, Lin Jingjing, my university roommate. We had been friendly, but not especially close. She was cheerful and straightforward, and we used to queue for meals together at the canteen. She ran over and hugged me, surprised to find me in the same estate. I told her I had moved here recently after selling my old home. When I asked about the "for sale" sign, she explained the situation honestly. The estate had fewer residents than expected because a nearby housing complex had recently been added to a key school's catchment area, drawing many buyers away. The supermarket barely broke even, and her brother had been quietly covering the losses with his truck driving income. The family had decided to sell up, move to the city, and find regular jobs instead. She admitted she loved the supermarket and didn't want to let it go, but the numbers just didn't work. I knew what she didn't. In my past life, once the heat crisis hit and prices soared, this supermarket became the community's main supply center, receiving and distributing government relief goods. The person who took it over eventually became part of the city's official reconstruction team. That was an opportunity one wasn't going to let slip away. I told Jingjing I wanted to invest and keep the supermarket running together. She thought I was joking or pitying her and tried to talk me out of it. I told her I was serious and asked her to call her father so both families could meet that evening. Back home, I told my mother and uncle about the plan. My uncle was cautious, worried the business wouldn't recover. I told him to trust me. Once the weather turned extreme, everyone would need to stock up and the supermarket would be essential. My mother didn't hesitate at all. She handed me her bank card and told me to use her savings however I needed. My uncle called my aunt, who also agreed. That evening we all went to a small restaurant in the estate and met Jingjing's father, Lin Yuanfeng, a quietly hard-working widower who had driven long-haul trucks for years to put both his children through university. Now approaching the age where long drives were too exhausting, he had invested in the shop as a gentler retirement plan, only for it to struggle. He was upfront about the poor sales figures and gently tried to warn us off. I told him the supermarket just needed a wider range of products to attract more customers and that the estate's low occupancy was only temporary. More residents would be coming. I couldn't tell him the real reason, that extreme heat, factory shutdowns, and skyrocketing prices were weeks away, and that a supermarket in a stable estate would soon be invaluable. After some discussion, both families signed an investment agreement. My mother and uncle each contributed 300,000 yuan, 600,000 total, in exchange for a shared ownership stake. From now on, both families would run the supermarket together. The next morning, I called the renovation team and brought them to the supermarket. I asked them to reinforce the doors, windows, and walls, replace the glass with shatterproof versions, and install security cameras all around. The team leader joked that the instant noodles inside would be getting bank vault treatment. I laughed. He wasn't wrong. In my past life, a bag of instant noodles had become worth about as much as a gram of gold. Jingjing watched with wide eyes and asked if all this was really necessary. I told her about the strong winds coming and suggested she reinforce her own flat's windows at the same time. She agreed, and the team offered us both a 20% discount since it was combined work. I left Jingjing to supervise and headed to the car dealership with my mother to pick up the two vehicles I had ordered, an SUV and an off-road car, both brand new. My mother was delighted. She asked quietly if I still had enough money. She had seen the basement filled with supplies and was amazed. It was like I had moved an entire warehouse into the house. I reassured her I was fine. I also told her about Grandma Lu giving me her savings to help cover everything. My mother nodded without surprise. Grandma Lu had been there for her since she was young, encouraging her to stay in school when other village girls dropped out, teaching her how to run a business after her divorce, and helping raise me during difficult years. My mother had always considered her a guardian figure. Of course, she would look after Grandma Lu for the rest of her life. We were just heading in to do the paperwork when we ran into my birth mother, Su Yilan, who had brought her car in for servicing. She spotted me before I could slip away. She grabbed my hand and asked for my address, saying she missed me and wanted to visit. Then she glanced at my mother, taking in her simple clothes with visible disdain, and turned back to me, offering to help me choose a car. "I've already bought mine, Mrs. Lu," I said calmly. I put my arm around my mother. "This is my mum. Your daughter Lu Xixue is waiting for you at home." Su Yilan's expression tightened. She started to blame me for what I had said in the mall a few days ago. Apparently my comment about Lu Xixue looking nothing like anyone in the Lu family had reached He Qing and Xia Wenhui, who had misunderstood and spread the idea that I was Su Yilan's secret illegitimate child. The story had spread through wealthy social circles, embarrassing the whole family. I asked her directly, had the Lu family been the ones spreading that story about me? Had she known and stayed silent? She looked away and denied it, but her body language gave her away. My mother had heard enough. She told Sue Elon firmly that I was her daughter and had nothing to do with the Liu family and asked them to stop saying damaging things about me. Sue Elon raised her voice, insisting she was my birth mother and that my mom was only my adoptive mother. "We're leaving now, Mrs. Liu.
Please move aside," I said.
We walked out without looking back. The small confrontation didn't dampen our mood at all. We went to the vehicle registration office, paid the taxes, verified the cars, and chose number plates. By early afternoon, we had both sets of plates in hand. My mother and I drove home together, one car each, both very pleased with ourselves. 3 days before the tornado, I harvested the first batch of vegetables from my space. The cabbage was crisp and fresh. I used the workshop's pickling function to make a jar of fermented cabbage. The beans had grown so thick it took hours to pick them all. The chilies were bright red, and I made some into fresh chili sauce and dried the rest. With that success, I expanded the planting area and sowed more seeds, including some honeysuckle for medicine. The supermarket reinforcement finished just in time. When I went to inspect it, the renovation team was already fielding a flood of new calls. The National Weather Service had issued an official warning about severe winds in 3 days. Everyone wanted their windows reinforced now. I was glad we had started early. My mother, uncle, and the Lin family spent the next 2 days stocking the supermarket with supplies from the wholesalers we had pre-ordered. New shelves went up, and everything was arranged neatly. The supermarket was ready. On the day of the tornado, I made sure my aunt came home early from work. I also reminded Jingjing to keep her family safe. Her father decided they would spend the night in the shop rather than risk the high-rise flat. By evening, the sky had turned an unsettling dark gray. A massive black cloud pressed low over everything, flickering with lightning. A few customers came in to stock up on food before staying home. Jingjing was pleased. Business was finally picking up. That night was terrifying even where we were. Our villa had been reinforced, and the tornado's worst path wasn't directly over us, but the wind howled so loudly it woke everyone up. We all gathered in the living room and watched the trees in the garden bend and shake. My aunt worried the roof might be torn off. I reassured her we were in a safer zone and that the renovations would hold. Grandma Lu noted that tornadoes like this were almost unheard of in China because the mountains usually blocked the conditions that caused them. She shook her head quietly and said the world was truly beginning to change. In the high-rise blocks, residents felt the buildings swaying and panicked, thinking it was an earthquake. The building managers acted quickly, stopping people from running outside and calling out that it was wind, not an earthquake. Everyone needed to move to lower floors or the basement and stay away from floor-to-ceiling windows. The estate group chat filled up with messages from the property office, directing people to shelter safely. 2 hours later, it was over. In the lobby of one of the residential towers, shaken residents compared stories. Some had run down 20 or more flights of stairs in the dark. Some in pajamas, some still wrapped in their duvets. One person said they had been gaming when a shaking started and thought a monster had escaped from their screen. Everyone laughed, still catching their breath, before slowly making their way back upstairs. Across the city, Han Yuan and Bai Qianqian had not been so lucky. They had been in their newly renovated flat when the tornado hit. The floor-to-ceiling window Bai Qianqian had insisted on installing shattered in the wind. Tree branches flew in through the gap. Bai Qianqian was nearly thrown from the bed and barely managed to grab the bedpost. Both of them were left gasping and shaking in the wreckage of their bedroom, unable to make a sound above the roar of the wind. The morning after the tornado, my mother and uncle had already gone to the supermarket before I even got up. Jingjing messaged to say her family had slept in the shop and were all fine, and that customers were already coming in to buy food and supplies, since another storm was forecast in 2 days. I walked around the estate to survey the damage. Our area had fared reasonably well. Many residents had heeded my earlier warning and reinforced their windows. The worst I saw was some broken glass in a few units, fallen trees, shattered air conditioning units, and oddly, a few fish lying belly up on the ground, blown in from somewhere. The news on my phone showed far worse scenes elsewhere. Whole rooftops torn away, crops destroyed, and in one heartbreaking video, A resident on the 14th floor sucked out through a shattered floor-to-ceiling window and killed. I put my phone down and breathed. This was only the beginning. 2 more storms were coming, and then the long heat. In the estate group chat, neighbors were venting about broken windows and the impossibly long queue for repairs. A few people thanked me for the early warning. I told everyone to stay home and stock up food for the coming days. At the supermarket, my mother and uncle were busy at the checkout counter, scanning and bagging with surprising efficiency after just 2 days of practice. Jingjing's father and brother were restocking shelves. The morning sales had already matched nearly half a month's worth of their previous income. Jingjing was beaming. One customer complained that the fresh vegetables had sold out early. Jingjing's father explained that the tornado had damaged many farms, and he had cycled to the nearby market at dawn to find whatever he could. Her brother suggested driving to the larger wholesale market to buy durable vegetables that could last a few days in storage. Everyone agreed it was a good idea. Only I knew that after the next 2 storms, most farmland in the region would be destroyed. And after the heat began, crops would fail entirely across the country. There would be no more outdoor vegetables at all. I helped for a while, then went home at lunchtime with my mother and uncle. My mother asked if we should buy more vegetables too. I opened the fridge, which I had quietly filled from my space that morning, and showed her what was inside. The whole family stared in amazement. My grandmother asked when I had bought all of it. I made up something about an early morning delivery order. Everyone was too delighted to question it further. We spent a cheerful lunch discussing which vegetables to pickle, which to blanch and freeze, and which to eat fresh. My grandmother also mentioned that the seedlings in the back garden had sprouted unusually fast. I had quietly replaced the pond water with water from my space stream. It worked like a natural fertilizer. 2 days later, the second storm came. The sky turned the same dark, electric purple as before. This time people were faster to react. Shops closed early. Residents rushed home. The wind lasted most of the day. Those with unrepaired windows sheltered in underground car parks or the temporary spaces the property team had set up in the ground floor lobbies. By 8 in the evening it was calm again. Jingjing and her brother arrived at my door carrying 4 boxes of vegetables between them, produce her brother had managed to get from the wholesale market before the crowds swept it clean. She had saved some especially for us. I insisted they come in, but they were in a hurry to get back and take stock of the warehouse. I didn't let them leave empty-handed. I scooped a few fish from the back garden pond and grabbed 2 chickens from my space, packaged everything up, and pressed it all into their arms. They laughed and protested, but I wouldn't take it back. They left clutching live chickens and bags of fish, disappearing into the quiet dark of the Villa district. 3 days after the second storm, the third and worst tornado hit. It lasted a full day. While we sat together in the living room watching the news, the lights suddenly went out. Power cut. The estate group chat filled up immediately with complaints. The property office explained that the wind had damaged the power lines and repairs would begin once it was safe. Some residents had already been without power since the first storm a week ago. We went down to the basement and started the villa's backup generator. The lights came back on. Grandma Lu looked at the generator's label and noted that a machine this powerful would burn through fuel quickly. I smiled. Fuel was the one thing I had plenty of. I opened the other 2 basement storerooms and showed the family everything: the outdoor equipment, solar panels, generators of various sizes, and dozens of drums of petrol and diesel, all neatly stored. My mother couldn't understand how I had bought so much petrol since stations don't sell it in bulk. I explained my method: filling the truck's tank at one station, draining it into containers, then driving to the next. The family went quiet, then my grandmother laughed and said I was brilliantly clever. I showed them the 9 large freezers running off their own diesel generator, all humming along steadily. My uncle stared at the generator and asked how on earth I had moved something that heavy inside. I muttered something about getting the renovation team to help, which wasn't entirely untrue. I just left out the part about using my space. Then I walked everyone through the main storage room like a tour guide, pointing out the rice, flour, and oil all sealed in small portions, the medical supplies, the toiletries, the cleaning products. Shelf after shelf, room after room. Everyone looked around, and someone said quietly that even if the world ended, our family would be fine. Things were not fine at the Lu house. While the tornado had not directly hit their villa, the coastal typhoon and tsunami had devastated the Tsinhai seaside resort, the Lu Group's biggest current investment. The landmark buildings that had just been completed were destroyed. The villa district was heavily damaged. The power and communication systems were wrecked. Several employees were injured and remained unconscious in hospital. Lu Siming and my birth father had spent days running around assessing losses and managing the fallout. The company was in serious financial trouble, and my birth father had no choice but to take out more bank loans. At home, Lu Sixue was having her own crisis. My birth father, already angry about the rumor scandal, had cut her and Lu Xiyuan's monthly allowances to almost nothing. Lu Sixue quietly called Song Yuhan in a tearful voice, telling him she had no money for a dress for an upcoming event. Song Yuhan immediately offered to send her money every month until they were married, reasoning that since they had a marriage contract, her expenses were partly his responsibility. He transferred money and spent a while comforting her on the phone. Lu Sixue looked at the amount and felt nothing. The seaside villa Lu Siming had given her, which she had proudly shown off to me, was now a pile of rubble. This money was nothing compared to that loss. Furious at herself for ever boasting about it, she went straight to a luxury boutique, ordered 2 new outfits, 2 handbags, and booked a 50,000 yuan full-body spa treatment. After 3 storms over about a week, the National Weather Service finally lifted the wind warning. Residents came out to help the property team clean up. The estate was scattered with debris, broken branches, shattered air conditioning units, dead fish from distant ponds, even iron railings pulled clean out of the ground. People chatted while they swept, sharing stories. High-floor residents said the buildings had swayed so much they felt seasick for days. Some had vomited repeatedly and couldn't eat. One person had somehow adapted to the swaying and now felt strange now that it had stopped. More significantly, displaced residents from harder-hit parts of the city were starting to move in. Entire blocks elsewhere had shattered windows and cracked walls. Some buildings were too damaged to be occupied. Hotels were full. People were living in underground car parks and emergency shelters. New Du Estate, which many original buyers had left because it seemed too remote, was now looking like a very good place to be. Things were also falling apart for others I knew. At the Lu house, my birth father quietly pressed Lu Sixue to lock in her wedding date with Song Yuhan as quickly as possible. The Song family's attitude had been growing uncertain, and he was afraid they would pull out. He also made a dismissive comment to my birth mother about me, something along the lines of finding me a decent company employee to marry, since I clearly wasn't cut out for wealthy family life. My birth mother sighed and agreed. The hardest story belonged to Bai Qianqian. Just a week earlier, she had felt like everything was going perfectly. Graduation coming, a beautiful flat, a devoted boyfriend, a comfortable future planned out. The storms destroyed all of it in days. Their flat was wrecked in the first storm. Han Yuan was struck by a flying sheet of metal, lost a lot of blood, and was rushed to hospital, which was so overwhelmed there were no beds available. His mother took him home to recover, and in her anger blamed everything on Bai Qianqian, leaving her alone in the damaged flat. The second storm came before Bai Qianqian could even process what had happened. The building's walls cracked, and everyone was evacuated to the underground car park. After that, the flat was declared unfit for occupancy until repairs could be completed, with no timeline in sight. Her parents' home had also been damaged. Hotels were full. So she went back to her university dormitory and curled up in bed, trying not to think about the 4 million yuan between their 2 families that had gone into that flat. Money neither family could afford to lose twice. She found herself blaming me. If I hadn't sold them that flat, she thought, none of this would have happened. Then her phone lit up.
It was Han Yuan. He was awake, he said.
He was worried about her and asked her to come stay at his family's home. Bai Qianqian grabbed that message like a lifeline. She wiped her eyes, packed a bag, and left. As soon as the storms passed, we installed the solar panels on the villa roof without wasting any time. I knew the wind had only been the beginning. The long period of extreme heat had already quietly started. At the supermarket, residents were queuing to charge their phones and power banks using the generator I had left there. Everyone bought something out of politeness. 2 delivery trucks arrived with fresh stock, and the whole family pitched in to unload. One customer complained loudly about vegetable prices. Jingjing explained that their stock had come from the wholesale market before it ran out, and once this batch was gone, there would be nothing to restock with. A delivery driver confirmed it. The tornado had destroyed most farmland. Leafy vegetables would take at least 3 weeks to grow back, beans over a month, aubergines even longer. I said nothing. I knew those 3 weeks would never come. Once the heat arrived, outdoor crops would fail completely. I quietly pulled Jingjing aside and suggested her family buy a generator and stock some fuel. She agreed and said her father would sort it. Being in the freight business, he knew more fuel suppliers than I did. On the way home, I noticed the estate was busier than usual. Wealthy owners who had left their villas empty were returning, driven back by the damage in the city center. Several villas near mine showed workers carrying in luggage. The estate group chat reflected the mood, people complaining about the heat, the vegetable prices, the power cut, and broken furniture. Someone noted the temperature felt unusually high for April. Others assumed it was just because the storms had cleared away the clouds. I closed the group chat. The heat was rising, just as I had known it would. In a few days, everyone would be turning on their air conditioning. Back in my space, the vegetables were growing beautifully. Tomatoes, cucumbers, lettuce, aubergine, beans, all ripening steadily. The fruit trees in the forest were blooming, full of bees and butterflies. I harvested a good amount and decided to sell the surplus quietly at the supermarket. With prices rising the way they were, it seemed a shame to waste the income. It wasn't going to get me to 100 million, but every bit helped. I fed the animals and checked on everyone. The chicks hatched weeks ago were growing fast. The hens would start laying soon. A few ducklings had hatched and were splashing around after their mothers. The rabbits had multiplied from 3 to over a dozen. The pigs had grown noticeably plumper. The old farmer had said they were best roasted at this size, but with 3 full freezers of meat still untouched, I decided to leave them a while longer. I came out of the space and found the white cat sitting on my bed, staring at me with a blank expression. I stared back. Neither of us said anything. I came out of my space to find the white cat sitting on my bed, staring at me. It explained through my mind that now that the space had enough crops growing and animals breeding, it had enough energy to come out into the real world. It said it wanted to stay by my side to protect me, and also to make sure I actually worked toward earning the 100 million needed to unlock the next area, since I had clearly given up on that goal. I held the little cat in my arms, feeling its purring. I pointed out it was very small and asked how exactly it planned to protect me. It told me calmly that it was a form of energy and nothing could hurt it. I agreed to let it stay. It only asked for a cat bed. I went out to buy one. Outside, I ran into new neighbors moving into the 2 villas next to mine. I immediately recognized one of them, Tang Shichi, a university classmate known as one of the wealthiest students on campus. Her family had donated several dormitory buildings to our university. She was with her fiancé, Zhou Ran. We were both surprised and happy to see each other. Tang Shichi explained that a tornado had shattered the floor-to-ceiling windows in their city apartment and left it in ruins, so they had decided to stay in the family's villa here while repairs were done, which would take about 2 months. I was glad to see her. I gave her a friendly warning. The temperatures were unusually high for April and getting worse. I suggested she check the villa's power and water systems and consider buying a generator or solar panels in case of more power cuts. She thanked me and quietly reconsidered her plan to move straight in, deciding to wait in a hotel while getting everything checked first. I drove into the city with the white cat to buy its bed. The roads had been mostly cleared by government repair teams, though buildings on both sides still showed damage and construction crews were everywhere. In the car, the cat asked about Tang Shichi. I mentioned her family was very wealthy. They had once donated several buildings worth hundreds of millions to our university. The cat immediately suggested I borrow 100 million from her. I nearly swerved. I told it firmly that we earn money honestly, and that asking for that kind of sum from a friend would make us look like fraudsters. The cat looked unconvinced, but said nothing more. Honestly, I wasn't in a desperate rush. My family was safe, the supplies were ready, and the space was running well. The 100 million could wait. At the shopping mall, I was surprised to find it packed with people, more crowded than any New Year I could remember. A shop assistant explained that many families whose homes had been damaged were coming to the mall to pass the time while waiting for repairs. Children, grandparents, everyone filling the space rather than sitting in broken or empty homes. The white cat wandered through the pet supply shop and chose its own bed, a small green mushroom-shaped one that looked a little like the mushrooms in the forest inside my space. I bought it along with a grooming brush and headed home. I wandered through the shopping mall for a while. It was still the first week after the tornado, so prices were mostly normal and shelves were fairly well stocked. But in the supermarket downstairs, the vegetable section was almost bare. The few vegetables left cost nearly 10 times their usual price. Customers complained loudly. A shop assistant explained patiently that outdoor crops had been destroyed, so everything available now came from indoor farms, which cost much more to run. A few minutes later, a group of well-dressed women strolled in and filled a whole trolley with vegetables without even glancing at the price tags. They chatted and laughed as they paid. I thought of something my economics teacher had once said. He asked the class, "If this year's harvest drops by 10%, how much do prices rise?" Everyone answered, 10%. He smiled and said, "No. Prices rise until 10% of people can no longer afford to eat." I left the mall and walked past by Qian without stopping, though I noticed how exhausted she looked. She had been staying at Han Yuan's home since his injury, and things there were not going well. His mother had grown cold and blamed Bai Qian for everything, the broken flat, the injury, all of it. Despite being pregnant, Bai Qian had been doing all the housework and waiting on everyone while Han Yuan recovered in bed. She had barely been able to breathe. Today was the first time she had been allowed out. Han Yuan's leg was healing well, and his mother was in a better mood. Bai Qian wandered the mall aimlessly, looking at things she couldn't afford to buy. Her parents' home had been damaged too. Both flats needed expensive repairs. She had no idea where any of the money would come from, or how her carefully planned future had collapsed so completely. That evening she returned to the house, was scolded immediately for going out, and was told to make dinner. She went to the bedroom, cried in Han Yuan's arms, and told him she was worried about her parents still living in an emergency shelter. He suggested she bring them to stay in the spare room. She pretended to hesitate, worried about his mother's reaction. He said he would handle it. She smiled privately to herself. With her parents there, his mother would find it much harder to treat her badly. I drove home to find the power had been restored. I turned off the generator and switched the villa over to the solar panels. With the sky completely clear and blazing, they would easily power the whole house. In another week or so, when it got hot enough to need air conditioning, they would handle that too. I opened the estate group chat to find everyone celebrating the return of electricity, sending cheerful messages back and forth. I looked up at the cloudless sky. The sun was already fierce. The ground was warming fast. It had begun. The estate group chat was full of celebration after the power came back. People thanked the supermarket for letting them charge their phones, and discussed why vegetables were still so expensive even though the tornado was over. One resident patiently explained that farms and orchards had been severely damaged. Only expensive indoor farms were still producing fresh food, and those supplied high-end shops for wealthy customers. Others suggested vitamin tablets and dried vegetables as alternatives for families with young children. I read through quietly, knowing something they didn't. The power restoration was only temporary. Once the heat intensified, electricity demand would spike so dramatically that the government would begin rationing power to residential areas, supplying it only during the hottest part of the day so people could run their air conditioning. I picked up my small trolley and loaded it with vegetables for my space. The second harvest had come in, and my family of 6 couldn't eat it all. I wheeled it over to the supermarket to sell the surplus. At 10 times the normal price, maybe I'll slowly work my way to 100 million, I said to the white cat. The cat stared at me. It clearly still thought robbing the Lu family would be faster. Meanwhile, at the Song house, Song Yuhan told his parents he wanted to marry Lu Xixue as soon as possible. His mother pointed out that the Lu family was in financial trouble. Their coastal resort project had likely collapsed, and Lu Bo was borrowing money from everyone he could find. Why rush into that mess? His father said nothing. He had actually been considering breaking the engagement, but now that the Lu family was publicly struggling, pulling out would make the Song family look dishonorable. Business relationships depended on trust. Song Yuhan stayed quiet too. He knew the logic. But then he thought about what had happened when Lu Xixue invited him to a hotel the day before, and his mind was made up. He wanted to marry her quickly. He argued to his parents that the Lu family's crisis was temporary. Tourist season was coming, the weather was warming, and the business would recover. His mother frowned but stopped arguing. After a long silence, his father said, "Let's announce the engagement first." An engagement would show the world they were keeping their word. Without fully locking in a marriage, the family could still step back later if needed. He had also recently received the paternity test results from his secret request, confirming his own 2 children were his. He felt quietly satisfied. A few days later, the Song family came to the Lu house to formalize things. Both families agreed on an engagement party at a hotel in mid-June, 2 months away. Everyone in the Lu family was pleased. My birth mother told Lu Xixue she would have a good life. My birth father was relieved. The engagement announcement would make it easier for him to borrow money, and the approaching tourist season would sort out the finances. Lu Xixue appeared delighted on the outside, but inside, she had been anxious for days. She wasn't certain Song Yuhan would still value her once he had what he wanted. But she had had no choice. My birth father had made clear that with me waiting in the background as the real daughter, Lu Xixue had to secure her position or risk losing everything. She had gambled, and she had won. Lu Ximing watched in silence. He didn't want this engagement to go through. But he was a practical man. The family needed Song family support right now, and feelings had to come second to business. He told himself there was plenty of time.
Even married people got divorced.
And in families like theirs, husbands and wives often lived separate lives anyway. My birth father then suggested to my birth mother that she call me and invite me to the engagement party. His plan was to hold a family reunion event afterwards and announce publicly that I was his illegitimate daughter, clearing up the gossip about my birth mother and also presenting me as another marriageable daughter for the Lu family's social dealings. My birth mother hesitated, remembering how firmly I had walked away at the car dealership. But she reasoned that once Lu Xixue moved to the Song household after the engagement, I would have no reason to stay away anymore. Lu Xiyuan said nothing. His allowance had been cut to almost nothing, and he had quickly learned how much he depended on his father's approval. He was keeping very quiet these days. I had no idea what the Lu family was planning. Today I had invited Jingjing over for lunch. She walked in and immediately noticed how cool the house was. Even the garden felt comfortable. I explained it was the air conditioning system, powered by our solar panels. She spotted the vegetable beds in the garden and laughed, saying she had wondered where all the produce I kept bringing to the supermarket was coming from. My grandmother brought out a large plate of fresh strawberries she had grown in the garden. Jingjing's eyes lit up. She said fruit had almost completely disappeared from the market. She popped one into her mouth and went quiet for a moment, then said it was the best thing she had tasted in weeks. She told me about the heat wave sweeping through the estate. An elderly woman nearby had been hospitalized for heat stroke after refusing to turn on her air conditioning. Residents had bought out every cold drink and ice cream in the supermarket. 2 large supermarkets in the city had apparently come to blows over a single delivery of ice cream. Jingjing's brother had stopped doing long-distance freight runs and was helping at the shop full-time instead. I listened and said nothing. I knew the factories and cold drink manufacturers were still running now, but in a few days, industrial power rationing would begin. Production would stop. After that, no amount of money would buy what was no longer being made. For lunch, my grandmother and Grandma Lu made a full spread: braised fish, sweet and sour ribs, pork with winter melon, tomato beef, and 2 vegetable dishes. Jingjing ate 3 bowls of rice, and left holding a box of vegetables and strawberries my grandmother had packed for her. Outside it was scorching. We walked to the supermarket under umbrellas, sweating the moment we stepped out of the shade. The restaurants nearby had all closed since the tornado. No vegetables to cook with. Only one noodle shop was still open, serving plain noodles with a little meat. At the supermarket, I found only my mother behind the counter. I asked where my uncle was. She explained that he had heard from the property management team that dozens of residents who had recently moved in needed air conditioners and fridges installed. It was exactly his trade. He had agreed a price and gone straight to work. He had found his calling at exactly the right moment. Things were getting ugly at Han Yuan's house. Ever since Bai Qianqian's parents had moved in, Han Yuan's mother had not had a moment's peace. Today she had simply asked Bai Qianqian to wash a bowl after dinner. Her parents immediately protested. Their pregnant daughter shouldn't be doing housework, they said. The baby was Han family blood and should be protected. Han Yuan's mother had worked right up until her own delivery and saw nothing wrong with washing a single bowl. But she was outnumbered. Her son kept asking her not to start conflicts, worried stress would affect the pregnancy. She gritted her teeth and washed the bowl herself while Bai Qianqian's mother sat on the sofa and cheerfully requested that her daughter be fed lettuce-braised chicken and blanched greens because of her pregnancy cravings. Han Yuan's mother nearly exploded. She had paid 3,000 yuan for a surprise vegetable box from a premium supermarket that contained 2 cabbages, a few small potatoes, 2 onions, 2 carrots, and 2 oranges, all clearly leftover stock, just to give her recovering son some nutrition. Now she was being asked to source specific vegetables for Bai Qianqian. She couldn't hold back anymore. She told Bai Qianqian's parents that if they didn't like the food and conditions in her home, they were welcome to leave. The argument at Han Yuan's house escalated quickly. Bai Qianqian's mother burst into tears and accused Han Yuan's mother of trying to throw out a pregnant woman. Her father threatened to take Bai Qianqian away and end the pregnancy. Han Yuan panicked and looked desperately at his mother to back down. Han Yuan's mother knew the threat was mostly empty. The Bai family had nowhere else to go, with their own home still under repair. But she couldn't bear to see her son so distressed. She took a deep breath, swallowed her anger, and explained as calmly as she could that vegetables simply weren't available anywhere right now. It wasn't a matter of willingness. Bai Qianqian made a show of graciously accepting whatever food was available. Han Yuan's mother turned away and silently fumed. Bai Qianqian was actually quite comfortable. She had her parents there to fight her battles, air conditioning to sit in, and news that repairs had started on the flat she and Han Yuan had bought. She was already planning the next redecoration, European minimalist style this time. A week later, temperatures broke a 300-year record for the city. The Weather Bureau issued an official high-temperature warning, and schools closed. My birth mother was worrying. My birth father had asked her to convince me to attend Lu Xishue's upcoming engagement party, after which he planned to hold a public announcement introducing me as his daughter, which everyone would understand to mean I was his illegitimate child. She had been trying to work out how to tell me for days, privately sensing that if I found out the Lu family intended to label me an illegitimate daughter, I would never come back. While she was fretting, the household staff brought in 2 large gift boxes from a luxury brand boutique, a VIP appreciation gift. Inside were carefully arranged fresh fruits and vegetables, beautifully presented, strawberries and grapes arranged in a heart shape, mangoes, apples, and starfruit filling the gaps, trimmed broccoli, colorful peppers, tomatoes, and green beans all neatly placed. Lu Xiyuan glanced over from his game and laughed at the 2 spring onions tucked into the vegetable box, calling it bizarre behavior from a luxury store. He had no idea that a single spring onion had become nearly impossible to buy anywhere. Since the tornado and the heat that followed, supermarket vegetable sections had been completely bare. Only expensive large-scale indoor farming operations still produced fresh food, and their products went straight to high-end retailers and wealthy clients. Ordinary people couldn't afford them. Luxury boutiques were sourcing these premium vegetables through special channels and sending them to VIP customers just to maintain relationships. Resources, as always, found their way to those at the top. My birth mother looked at the beautiful boxes and thought of me, quietly wondering if I could even get vegetables where I was living. Lu Xiyuan told her not to worry about me. I had taken 6.4 million yuan, which was more than enough to eat well. He was more concerned about his own allowance being cut and complained that his friends were all holidaying abroad while he was stuck at home with barely enough pocket money. My birth mother soothed him and said things would improve once the company's finances recovered. In her room, Lu Xixue was browsing engagement dress designs with a designer. She had chosen a light fabric covered in crystals. She also knew about my birth father's plan to publicly announce me as his illegitimate daughter. She thought about it with quiet satisfaction. Even if I returned to the Lu family, I would return as a scandal, always looked down on. She would always be above me. That thought made her very happy. My mother came home that evening looking shaken. 2 customers had come to blows at the supermarket over a delivery of ice cream. Only 10 boxes had arrived, and one person tried to take the whole lot. The fight was so fierce that even Jingjing's father and brother had struggled to break it up. The 2 customers had almost come to blows again outside before eventually dispersing. I was relieved my mother was unhurt, but I wasn't surprised. Things were already getting rough, and it would only get worse. A few days earlier, I had brought vegetables from my space to sell at the supermarket. They were gone almost instantly. But 2 older women had started fighting over the last cabbage. One wanted it for her grandson's dumplings, the other said her son hadn't eaten vegetables in days.
One
of them, who had moved from the countryside after the tornado, knew very well from decades of farming that these temperatures were not normal and crops would not recover soon. She wasn't waiting around for prices to drop. Jingjing eventually cut the cabbage in half and sold each woman a piece. Shortly after, a group of people came in from a neighboring estate asking where we had sourced the vegetables. I made up something about old stock. They left unconvinced, eyeing us suspiciously. That was the moment I decided to stop selling vegetables at the supermarket. We were drawing too much attention. In a city where fresh vegetables had almost completely disappeared, anyone who kept producing them would become a target. That evening, my grandmother suggested we sell our garden's surplus produce. Grandma Lu, and I gently talked her out of it. As Grandma Lu put it, having something valuable in a lawless time was a danger in itself. Our household was full of elderly women and no one strong enough to defend against people who might come looking. My grandmother nodded, a little frightened, and promised to keep quiet about our garden. The heat meant I rarely went out. I spent my days tending the space, harvesting crops, feeding animals, and worrying with the white cat about how to earn 100 million yuan. The vegetables were producing faster than 6 people could eat, and I had to feed the excess to the animals rather than let it go to waste. It felt heartbreaking. My aunt came home from work one evening pink-faced and drenched in sweat, saying the bus drivers weren't running air conditioning anymore because fuel prices had risen so much. I listened and noted quietly that broad price increases had begun. Ice cream had become expensive enough that people were making their own at home with frozen juice or yogurt. Meat, eggs, and milk prices had all risen because farms were paying more to keep animals cool. My aunt mentioned that several of her colleagues' homes had lost power and they were sleeping at the factory rather than going back to a hot, dark flat. She was grateful we still had electricity. I suddenly remembered, from my past life, rationing of residential power had started around late April. Because we had been running on solar panels, I hadn't even noticed the grid going down. I quickly checked the estate group chat. It was full of panic. The estate group chat erupted. Residents were in a panic. The government had announced rationed electricity across the city. Power would only be supplied from noon to 2 in the afternoon each day. Everything else was to keep factories running. People worried about their elderly relatives, their babies, their melting ice cream. The property management office explained that even the building's backup generators had to be rationed, only enough fuel allocated to keep elevators and fire systems running. Families with small children were organizing shared taxis to the shopping mall, which still had air conditioning. I already knew this was coming. The government had seen what was ahead and was giving factories a few weeks to produce as much as possible before things got worse. I was worried about my mother at the supermarket and went to check on her. The walk there at 3 in the afternoon was brutal. Even with an umbrella, and a handheld fan, I arrived with my back completely soaked. The supermarket was crowded, people charging phones with a shared power banks, others quietly sitting near the shelves just to be in the air conditioning. The ice cream fridges were empty again. Jingjing was stocking the fridge with mineral water to chill. My mother scolded me gently for coming out in the afternoon heat, then handed me a cold bottle of water. She said they had switched to the generator the moment the power cut happened, and the air conditioning was still running. She told me to stop coming over every day, or I would get heat stroke. A man sheltering nearby said heat stroke was no small thing right now. Hospitals were already overwhelmed with cases. A woman beside him added that the construction teams repairing storm-damaged buildings had been forced to stop working during the day because of the heat and were only working through the night. Jingjing asked what was happening to all the people still displaced from damaged buildings. Back at the Liu family villa, things were deteriorating. My birth father had been excited in mid-April when the early heat seemed to promise an early tourist season. Now the famous mountain resorts had hit 40 or even 50 degrees, and every scenic area had closed. No one was traveling anywhere. The banks were chasing payments. The Song family had promised investment support but hadn't acted. In desperation, my birth father had started borrowing from unofficial lenders just to cover bank interest. Then the central air conditioning in the villa suddenly switched off. The power had been cut. The housekeeper checked the backup generator. It was out of fuel. My birth father had been so busy with the company's financial crisis that he had completely forgotten to stock up on fuel, despite being warned weeks earlier. Now energy was government-controlled and nearly impossible to buy. The black market had some, but at 20 times the previous price. He vented his frustration at my birth mother, complaining about household expenses. She pointed out tearfully that food prices had tripled, she had returned new clothes from the boutique delivery, and had canceled club memberships to save money. He eventually backed down and asked her to cut back wherever she could while the company worked through its difficulties. She nodded quietly, wiping her eyes. In that household, he controlled the money, and she had very little say. A woman at the supermarket explained that the government had converted hotels, sports halls, and old quarantine facilities into temporary housing for people displaced from damaged buildings. Jingjing nodded with relief. The government would not abandon its people. I quietly pulled Jingjing aside and warned her that the heat would likely cause drought and water shortages soon. I told her to stock up on bottled water at home, to do it quietly at night to avoid drawing attention, and to spread it across multiple rooms, rather than piling it in one place because of the floor load. She listened carefully and said she would send her brother to the water factory that very evening. She also thanked me again for the earlier tip about generators. Her father and brother had initially thought it unnecessary, but she had insisted. The 2 generators they bought for 10,000 yuan combined were now going for 1,000,000 yuan each. With what they had stored, the family had enough power for a year or 2. I smiled and said we look after each other in difficult times. I stayed at the supermarket with my mother until the sun was lower and the air was slightly cooler. On my way out, my phone rang from an unknown number. It was my birth mother again, calling on a new number after I had blocked her previous ones. She told me Liu Xishua's engagement was coming up in just over a month, and that afterwards Liu Xishua would be moving out of the Liu house. She hoped I would come home then. She tried to tempt me. The Liu house had air conditioning around the clock, fresh vegetables and fruit, everything I could want. And did my adoptive mother, a divorced woman, really have the means to provide all that? I almost laughed. In my past life, my birth brother had used the exact same logic to pressure me into serving the family's interests. Back then, I had nowhere else to go. This time I had solar panels, a full harvest every week, and more vegetables than my family could eat. I don't want any of what the Liu family has to offer, I said. Keep it for yourself. Don't call me again. I hung up and blocked the new number immediately. Just outside my front gate, I found Tang Shiqi, waiting to ring the bell. She was holding a box of fresh vegetables and fruit, the kind that would cost a fortune anywhere in the city right now. She said it was a thank you gift for my earlier advice, which had allowed them to prepare in time. She handed it over and said she had to get back. Then, just as she was leaving, She mentioned that her boyfriend Zhou Ran's family was in the indoor farming and livestock business. I stood still.
Zhou Ran.
Zhou family. Indoor farming. I suddenly connected the name. The Zhou family had been one of the most important agricultural businesses during the apocalypse in my past life, holding patents in indoor growing and breeding, running large-scale facilities. When outdoor crops failed everywhere, the Zhou family became one of the main suppliers of food for those who could afford it. The government had partnered closely with them on rebuilding and food production. They had strong official backing and only grew more powerful as things got worse. The Liu family had tried to approach them and been completely ignored. My birth father and brother had been furious about it, calling the Zhou family arrogant. But the Zhou family had never stumbled. And in the rebuilding of New Du estate, my estate, the person in charge had been a Zhou family member. Probably one of Zhou Ran's relatives. I watched Tang Shichi walk back to her villa, turning all of this over in my mind. I walked through the villa gate carrying the box of vegetables and immediately felt the cool air wrap around me. The temperature difference between inside and outside was remarkable. My grandmother and Grandma Liu were in the living room watching TV, with the white cat curled up in my grandmother's lap. I had told the family I had found the cat as a stray, and everyone had welcomed it happily. My grandmother sometimes caught small shrimp from the garden pond as treats for it. The cat didn't actually need to eat, but it always accepted whatever my grandmother offered, and seemed to have genuinely developed a taste for it. My grandmother asked where all the fruit and vegetables had come from. I explained it was a gift from a new neighbor and university classmate. My grandmother immediately worried we should send something back in return. I told her not to. We could help when the time came. That evening I explained the Zhou family's indoor farming business to the white cat and wondered out loud if there was a way to sell produce from my space the way they did. I wasn't greedy. I just wanted enough to reach 100 million. We thought about it for a long time and came up with nothing useful.
May arrived.
Temperatures kept climbing. News reports showed dried up streams and large areas of dead vegetation across the country. My watermelons were starting to grow, still fist-sized. Fruit trees in the forest were beginning to produce. I stayed up late processing animal feed because the farm population had grown so large. The next morning I was woken by a call from my mother. A neighbor's child had severe heat stroke. There were no ambulances available. Could I come with a car? I was dressed and out the door in minutes. At the supermarket, I found a crowd gathered around a young woman sobbing with a boy of about 6 or 7 unconscious in her arms, his face bright red. My mother said they had tried cooling him with ice water, but his temperature wouldn't come down. He had already had convulsions. I told them to get in the car immediately. On the way to hospital, I learned their story. The woman, Huan from the estate group chat, had been alone with her son in a 27th floor flat since her husband was busy managing storm repairs elsewhere. High floors got hotter. Since power rationing began, her son had been unwell. She had been awake all night cooling him down, only for his fever to spike again before dawn. She had no car, no money for the few remaining taxis that now charged hundreds of yuan per kilometer, and a dead phone battery. She had gone to the property office for help, but all their vehicles were electric, and in the extreme heat, the battery warning lights wouldn't stop flashing.
No one dared drive them.
She had asked other residents for help with a petrol car, but oil prices had risen so much that no one was willing to use their fuel for a stranger. Eventually, someone brought her to the supermarket, where at least there was air conditioning. My mother had called me. I drove with the air conditioning on full and got them to the nearest hospital as fast as the speed limit allowed. The emergency department was overwhelmed. The hospital had set up a dedicated heatstroke ward and pulled doctors from every department to staff it. We registered, paid, and waited. A doctor assessed the boy quickly and arranged treatment. We were asked to wait outside. Too many patients, no visitors allowed inside. I sat with Huan in a shaded corner of the waiting area. She was pale and shaking. She had not slept and had not eaten. I slipped away to a quieter spot to get some bread and a small cucumber from my space to give her. I turned the corner and came face to face with my adoptive father, Li Yadong, and his whole family of 6. At the hospital entrance, I ran straight into Li Yadong, my adoptive father, and his whole family of 6. They were being turned away by a doctor. Li Yadong had wrapped his son Li Yaozhu in a jacket on the way over, making the boy look sicker than he was, hoping to get him a hospital bed and use the room's air conditioning as a free refuge. The family had already tried sheltering in a shopping mall and a government disaster shelter. Both had turned them away or shut off their cooling. The doctor had told them the boy didn't need treatment, just some cold water and a cool cloth, but Li Yadong's mother was screaming that her grandson deserved a hospital bed. A security guard was in the process of escorting them out. As they turned the corner, we came face to face. Li Yadong recovered quickly and asked politely how I was doing. Before I could answer, his son Li Yaozhu spotted the small cucumber in my hand and immediately started whining that he wanted it. Li Yadong smiled in his most charming way and reached out to take it, saying his son needed hydration. His whole family stared at the cucumber hungrily. They had been eating instant noodles with chili paste for weeks. Fresh vegetables had become completely unaffordable and sold out instantly whenever they appeared. I stepped back from his reaching hand. Want it? 300 yuan. Li Yadong frowned and told me I was becoming too materialistic, just like my mother, always thinking about money. I said calmly, if you don't care about money, then pay up. Surely your precious son is worth 300 yuan for a cucumber. His mother called me ungrateful and said her grandson was doing me a favor by wanting my food. His father said I wasn't fit to be considered family. I laughed. When you die, I'll be celebrating, not mourning. Are you buying or not? Li Yadong gritted his teeth.
Fine.
I'll buy. Actually, I said with a smile, I've changed my mind. I'm not selling anymore. I turned and walked back into the hospital.
Li Yaozhu shrieked in fury.
Li Yadong lunged forward, then stopped when he saw the security guards watching. He muttered some curses and left with his family. I found Manhwa in the waiting area and gave her the bread and cucumber. She said the cucumber was too expensive and tried to give it back. I told her to eat it. She accepted gratefully but quietly put it aside. She was saving it for her son. A little while later, the doctor wheeled the boy out. His temperature had come down, and he was conscious again, a little dazed but recovering. The doctor told them to avoid high floors during the hottest part of the day and to come down to the lower levels at noon if possible. I drove them back to the estate and dropped them at the supermarket to wait in the cool air until evening. On the way, Huan gave her son the cucumber. He bit into it with obvious delight. The boy who used to hate vegetables said it was the sweetest, crunchiest thing he had ever tasted. We had just arrived at the supermarket when I heard something that stopped me cold. Someone had died in the estate. People in the supermarket were discussing a death in the estate. An elderly man on the 26th floor with underlying health conditions had passed away in his sleep from the heat. High floors had become dangerously hot. Some residents described their rooms feeling like ovens even with wet floors and sealed doors. I quietly contributed to the collection the property office organized for his family. In the estate group chat, people were frightened and angry. High-floor residents talked about sending children back to relatives in cooler areas, sleeping at their workplaces, or doing anything to escape the heat. Someone was selling battery-powered fans for 3,000 yuan each. A few people called it price gouging. Others bought them anyway just to survive the nights. Deaths from heat stroke were happening across the city, especially among the elderly, people with existing illnesses, and very young children. I knew this couldn't go on much longer. The government would act.
And it did.
A new policy came out. Residential areas would have their power restored to 24 hours a day. In exchange, industrial electricity use was slashed dramatically. Office buildings lost 80% of their power allocation. Factories across the city had no choice but to shut down entirely. The reason was simple: drought had severely reduced hydroelectric output. With almost every household running air conditioning around the clock, the gap between supply and demand was enormous. The government chose people over production. My aunt's clothing factory stopped operations. She came home and found herself with nothing to do, which made her restless. My uncle had been hired informally by the property management team to install and repair appliances. There was plenty of work as residents set up equipment for the long, hot months ahead. My mother was running the supermarket and had already received a good dividend from that month's strong sales. When the power came back on, The estate group erupted with celebration. But a few residents quickly pointed out that with factories shut down, prices for manufactured goods would rise. Others rushed to stock up on nappies and baby formula. The skeptics told them they were panicking unnecessarily. My aunt asked me whether we should turn off the basement generators and rely on mains power instead, since electricity was cheaper than fuel.
No, I said.
Electricity. Prices are going up. She looked at me with raised eyebrows, then checked her phone and found a government announcement published just minutes earlier confirming exactly that. The new pricing structure kept the first usage tier the same as before, but the second and third tiers increased by dozens or hundreds of times respectively. Any household running air conditioning freely would face electricity bills of tens of thousands of yuan per month. Those who couldn't pay would eventually be limited to the minimum first-tier allocation, just enough not to die. People quickly learned to be careful. They turned off set-top boxes, routers, and water heaters when not in use. Lights stayed off unless necessary. Every unit of electricity was saved for the fridge and the air conditioner. In my space, the honeysuckle had bloomed, drawing in bees and butterflies. The white cat leaped around chasing butterflies while I harvested flower buds to dry for cooling teas. Then I planted some Isida's root nearby, another herb for reducing heat and inflammation. I planned to make herbal drinks for the family. When I came out of the space and turned on the shower, nothing came out. I had forgotten, water rationing always followed the power cuts. And unlike the power rationing, which had only lasted about a month, the water shortage would go on for a long time. Drought was real. River levels were falling. Even with the government investing heavily in seawater desalination, production couldn't keep up with demand. Water prices had risen dozens of times over. I checked the estate group chat and found it full of panicked messages. The property office had announced that water would only be supplied for 1 hour at noon and 1 hour in the evening. I went downstairs and reassured my grandmother and Grandma Lu. We had backup water tanks and the converted basement pool. I switched over to the backup supply, and we went on with dinner as normal. My mother and aunt came home late, both exhausted. My uncle had been so busy fixing overloaded air conditioners for residents that he was barely home. He mentioned that a colleague at the property office had been eating plain rice with pickled vegetables for days. Meat had risen to several hundred yuan per kilogram. My aunt described the scene at the supermarket. The moment news of water rationing spread, customers had flooded in. Bottled water sold out instantly. Even an unpopular tea drink that normally sat on shelves untouched was swept away. Bags of rice and flour disappeared too. Elderly customers who had lived through famine years were the quickest to act, sensing something was seriously wrong. The Lin family father and son had spent hours hauling goods to the lifts, nearly collapsing from the heat in the process. My mother came home carrying a pineapple, a gift from Huan's husband, who had finally finished his work on storm-damaged buildings around the city and returned home. He had wanted to thank us for taking his son to hospital. My grandmother was startled by how expensive fruit had become, saying she had seen apples selling for hundreds of yuan each online. She worried we shouldn't accept such a costly gift. Grandma Lu and I both reassured her that in difficult times, giving and receiving gifts was how people looked after each other. We sat down to a full dinner together, braised duck, pork, tofu, and lamb with pickled vegetables. Outside, the world was struggling. Inside, we were warm and fed and together. At Han Yuan's house, things were deteriorating further. His mother found Bai Qianqian turning on the air conditioning again and snatched the remote away furiously. That month's electricity bill had already reached 9,000 yuan. Han Yuan had just recovered from his leg injury and was ready to return to work, only to discover he had been made redundant. The company had been quietly cutting staff while he was on sick leave. With the flat purchase having drained the family's savings, they were now surviving on his mother's pension alone. Bai Qianqian's parents had gone home when their own building was repaired, but Bai Qianqian had stayed. She was pregnant and felt the Han family owed her care. With her parents gone, Han Yuan's mother had immediately returned to making her life difficult. Han Yuan was too consumed by anxiety over his job loss to do much about it. Bai Qianqian sat in the hot flat, miserable, and thought she couldn't take much more of this. Han Yuan gently suggested to Bai Qianqian that they move back to their repaired flat soon. She snapped at him. What was the point of moving out when electricity and water cost a fortune, and he had no job? Han Yuan stared at her, stunned by her sharp tone. She had always been so soft-spoken before, but she had reached her limit. Weeks of pregnancy nausea in the heat, a mother-in-law who begrudged her every sip of cool air, barely able to shower because the water pressure dropped whenever the tap was shared. She had scratched her own scalp raw from the itching and had made herself more nauseated trying to cover the smell with perfume. After a few deep breaths, she softened her tone, said she was just suffering from pregnancy symptoms, and asked if she could go back to university for a few days to collect her graduation certificate. She told him not to come. She was staying in the women's dormitory. He should use the time to find a job. Han Yuan handed over what little money he had left and told her to call him when she was ready to come home. She smiled and said nothing. I was up early to help at the supermarket. The panic buying of recent days had nearly emptied the shelves, and today was a stock-taking and restocking day. The night before I had stayed late in my space. The apricot and plum trees in the forest had started bearing fruit, golden, fragrant, wonderfully sweet. I ate far too many. I also found a beehive deep in the trees, carefully harvested part of it, and processed it into honey in the workshop. The color was deep gold, thick and fragrant, with a faint floral note. Even the white cat couldn't stop eating it. I mixed the dried honeysuckle buds into the honey and made a herbal honey drink. 1 cup left me feeling clear-headed and refreshed despite the heat. I made 10 jars in total, 5 for the family fridge, 3 for the Lin family, and 2 for Tang Shiqi. Tang Shiqi had been coming over regularly. She had brought us fruit from her boyfriend's family's indoor farm, melons, oranges, grapes, watermelon, apples. She had grown up lonely, raised mostly by household staff after her parents divorced, and she genuinely loved the warmth of our home. Everyone in my family liked her. The white cat was especially fond of her and always circled her excitedly, as if it could see the number 100 million written above her head. At the supermarket, delivery trucks were lined up outside. The government was subsidizing fuel for supply vehicles to keep goods moving. We spent the morning unloading and restocking. Jingjing told me quietly that she had followed all my advice: water, food, medicine. And their home now looked like a warehouse, with supplies stacked 3 layers deep on the floor. The supplier delivering canned goods that day mentioned prices had more than doubled since April and warned that factories weren't likely to reopen soon. He said once current stock ran out, a tin that now costs 30 yuan would sell for 80, and people would still buy it. I asked how long stocks would last. He guessed the smaller factories had 1 to 2 months left, larger ones perhaps 3 or 4. By the time we finished sorting everything, it was clear that almost all the profit from recent strong sales had been swallowed by the higher cost of restocking. Then Jingjing's father and brother returned. They had left before dawn in 2 large trucks to collect water directly from the bottled water factory, but came back with less than 1 truck's worth. Jingjing's father and brother had driven 2 large trucks to collect water from bottled water factories, but came back with less than 1 truck's worth. Every factory they visited was either sold out or had shut down. Their water sources had dried up completely. The little they managed to find had cost them 90 yuan per case, up from the usual 20. Everyone in our group was worried. That was more than 4 times the previous price, and nobody knew if customers would accept it. Jingjing nervously messaged all the customers who had pre-ordered, telling them the water had arrived along with the new price. She braced herself for complaints. Nobody complained. Many customers immediately ordered more, 30, 60 cases at a time. After days of ration water that barely trickled from the tap, people had stopped thinking about price. By that evening, almost 3/4 of the stock was gone. The rest sold out overnight through the estate group chat. We finished late and walked home exhausted. My grandmother handed us tall glasses of the honeysuckle honey water from the fridge. 1 glass and the tiredness seemed to lift. My aunt said it was the most refreshing thing she had ever tasted. I was quietly amazed. I had thought the effect was my imagination the first time, but clearly it was real. The space produced something special. The white cat listened as I described the water situation in the villa district, private tanker trucks delivering to wealthy households, each tank of water costing over 10,000 yuan.
The cat
Thought for a moment and said, if we sold water from the peach blossom stream at 10,000 yuan a tank, we'd reach 100 million eventually. We both sat thinking about it.
We had plenty to sell.
We just needed a way to do it safely. The grand engagement party Liu Xixue and Song Yuhan had planned for mid-June was quietly scaled back. Both families had business loans to worry about, and a lavish public celebration while struggling to repay debts would look terrible. The venue was changed from the city's biggest hotel to the Song family villa, with only a small circle of close associates invited. Liu Xixue was bitterly disappointed. She had needed a public event to silence rumors about her identity. Now that was gone. At the Liu house, temperatures and tempers were both running high. Tourism had collapsed. Nobody was traveling anywhere in this heat, and the Liu group was hemorrhaging money. My birth father had been selling assets and cutting staff for weeks, but couldn't stop the decline. He was furious about everything, and when he saw the household electricity bill had reached 600,000 yuan for the month, he erupted at my birth mother and Liu Xixue.